Fork bond issue. So it was 2 years ago that that bond issue passed. And part of that bond issue and part of the work up to that was sort of all these plans that I had Susan put on the wall today, starting kind of with how the bond was going to work, where we were going to actually allow there to be buildings and where we would seek reimbursement. This was the park plan that we were using as our guide for the river improvements. And then this started really the out-of-town planning process. And if you look at sort of all of these maps and where we started, the thought was, and the forecast that we used in 2013 was that there was going to be a reimbursement that the town would receive over time related to the Pandas Fork. And that portion of the parcel, and that top map, it's really everything that was along Two Rivers Road that would be developed. And so as we put together the fixed fork bond issue, there was $3 million that was called tax-exempt debt, dedicated to park improvements. $2 million that was taxable and related to the private improvements that could occur on this parcel. And that parcel is often called the CDC parcel, the Roaring Fork Community Development Corporation parcel, or the parcel that's next to Two River Road. It has lots of names. But CDC is typically the name that you hear it called. As we looked at the out-of-town planning process, we had people vote on 3 options. And what's interesting, option 2 actually showed a park in the middle and really that development parcel developed. As we got into the Downtown Area Advisory Council piece, the Downtown Area Advisory Council Committee introduced the idea of the V, that there needed to be a view corridor from the downtown to the river. And then they started, in a sense, pushing development down to River Road, closer to the RMI project at the time. That then morphed into what I would call the bigger V, and the V that the Planning Commission has adopted, which is basically half the Roaring Fork CDC site available for development, and let's just call it this section in here, and half of it left to a park. So the original premise that we were using back here, and this is why this sort of becomes important to the discussion tonight, was that there was going to be a parcel that would reimburse the town. Now that reimbursement is about $2.5 million, and it's made up of a combination of river improvements, improvements that are attributable directly to that site, as well as the relocation of 18 trailers that was found on the Roaring Fork CDC site. If you remember, back in 2013, we also adopted, in early 2013, a new zoning district, and we had changed the affordable housing guidelines to allow for a relocation to count instead of either a contribution or mitigation housing at that time. So the idea is that if there is development, it will help repay the town back for the trailers that were relocated from the parcel, the improvements that were made to the parcel to remove it from the floodplain, and then a portion of the costs related to the river improvements that can be apportioned back to the Roaring Fork CDC site. The Roaring Fork CDC site is 100,987 square feet. If you wanted to know, that's 2.317 acres. So the idea in 2013, and then through 2014 until the end, was that there was some level of reimbursement that the town would receive. Jim DeFrancia, when he was negotiating with the CDC, thought he had an entire parcel that would be developed, but that parcel has been cut in half. And one of the issues that we need to address, and one of the things that we talked about in the 5-year financial forecast, and Bruce is going to talk about, is the fact that without that $2.5 million reimbursement, it affects the long-term financing of the general fund, because that's not $2.5 million that's going to come back. It could be if it's determined that there's a bond issue that we want to put forth to the voters, if it's determined that maybe we waive the park fees, or we figure out a way to purchase or acquire the property. But right now, it puts sort of a hole in our general fund.
Thank you.
Now, we've recognized that, and so there is a 5-year financial forecast that's in the back. It looks like this. And it will also be on the town's website. There is a handy-dandy fund balance bar chart. So if you go to the page that says 5-year financial forecast, 2016 to 2010, which is on one side, that is where we set currently if there is a reimbursement back to the town. The orange bar is our current projected ending fund balances, and the red bar is the fund balance requirement that we have under council policy, which is council policy 103, that says we will preserve or reserve 1/3 of our general fund revenues as a fund balance target, meaning that we will try to always carry a reserve of that amount. If you flip it over and you net out that there's no $2.5 million reimbursement, then you see how it affects the orange bar, which is the fund balances, to the point that in 2019 and 2020 there are no fund balances. So the issue becomes not only one of how does this project develop as we go forward, but then how do we, if there is no reimbursement, fix the hole in our general fund budget. All of this can be fixed. It wasn't anticipated that the map would end up looking like this. Had it been, we would have changed some of our scenarios 3 years ago related to the type of and level of reimbursement that the town could receive. So this is the map we're using, and this is the map that Bruce worked off of in coming up, and I believe it's option 3E1 that we use as the basis. We have a whole bunch of sheets that look like this, really tiny print with all kinds of assumptions. We've tried to take into account questions that we received from the public related to potential development options, whether it was events and what could events do and what do they generate in terms of income, to event spaces, and let's say they're 5,000 to 5,500 square feet.
Are you saying VITs?
Events.
Events.
You have a strange accent, sir.
Yeah, it's a cool events and what they can produce. And I can do sort of the fast math on events for you, because what happens is there's I think, an assumption that events generate economic activity. And I'll just give you an example of just if we were, what we've spent to date for events in Basalt is about $113,000, and we've received about $2,500 to $5,000 in sponsorships so far. So that sort of, let's just say that's what it costs
This year?
this year. Taking over some of the events that the chamber had done in the past, but the chamber isn't really an event sponsoring it's not really an event sponsoring organization as such. And so we just did some like really simple, it kind of points to there's a lot of people that want us to try to figure out the economic impact of all the different scenarios, either direct, indirect, or induced. Meaning that the coaster occurs in snowmass, and what does that do for Basalt? That would be an induced benefit to Basalt if there are more summer activities in snowmass, meaning that coaster might, create another 50 people that eat in Basalt or buy groceries at the Whole Foods. So that's an induced impact from an investment made in snowmass. And so if you just take an event, and I'll just give you a very simple one. We have a 3% sales tax. We have 1% of our lodging tax, which comes back to the towns, for a total of 4%. If we were to have an event that would bring 1,000 people to town, and let's say there were 20 available hotel rooms that could be used in conjunction with the event, understanding that currently our summer months are the best months in terms of hotels and their bookings, but there's 20 rooms available. Those 20 rooms were booked, and each of those 1,000 people spent $100 in addition to their hotel room. That would generate indirect, measurable sales tax and lodging tax, $3,120. If you were to have an event person that would help you do 30 events, you might be able to pay for the event person because you're only generating $3,120 per event. There's 30 events, it's roughly $95,000 to $100,000. And so what happens is there's a feeling that those events are going to generate And indirect dollars, well, if you account for the hotel space and if you account for each person spending $100, that would include the kids. Let's say a family of 4 will spend $400 the day they're here plus $150 for the hotel room. You only get to $3,120. So then you look at like event spaces that people have shown examples of throughout Colorado. The one, I think Donovan Pavilion is one that I probably received the most emails on. Donovan Pavilion in Vail. It is operated by the Donovan Pavilion Management, Inc. So it's a private corporation that actually manages the pavilion. The town of Vail just contributes capital for it to be built, and then they contribute capital over time. So in 2015, they contributed $720,000 to Donovan Pavilion to fix issues related to sounds. It was too loud, and it affected the neighbors, and to replace HVAC and some wood floors at the event center. If you take the cost of that event space and you put it in today's dollars, it's about a $7 million space that you would create. If you then take the parking that the Donovan Pavilion has, which is 136 parking spaces, and you try to figure out if we take the on-street parking and then we were to build a parking, you would need approximately 1.4 acres to build the event space and the associated parking to support it. And so when you start looking at some of these iterations of ideas, what I always come back to, this is a very small space. It can only hold so much development. The development, for the most part, has to be vertical, but the verticality has to be fitting with the rest of the downtown. It can't be out of place. And I think the one thing that you see on all of these options is the idea that it has to fit with the downtown, and it has to be appropriate to scale. The one thing that I will point out is there's a couple quotes that I want you to hopefully remember from tonight. Life is like a multiple choice question. Sometimes the choices confuse you, not the question itself. So the question has always been, why are we doing this? And the answer, depending on, it doesn't really matter what their plan is. It has to do with vitality. It has to do with making the downtown more vital. So whether it's an event space or events or a hotel or condominiums or a restaurant, the question is vitality. It's in the choices that you get the confusion. So what we've asked Bruce to do is really the second quote up there, which is the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. So that's sort of Bruce's job. So here are 3 options. How do they look? What do they yield? Why do they look the way that they do? Are there other things that could be considered? So he's just objective. I'm just trying to figure out if I were to fit 75,000 or 30,000 or 35,000 or a park, what does it look like? What does it cost? What does it generate? In direct dollars, direct costs. Because these are the things you have to put in your 5-year financial forecast. These are the things you have to start budgeting for if you choose one of these options. And the sooner you start accounting for how you're going to pay for them, the sooner you put together the financial plans to make them happen. I will tell you that Bruce and I have went back and forth on parking. The good news is we have a number of developments that have occurred in the last year in Basalt that have yielded us good numbers related to construction of condominiums, construction of hotels, construction of restaurants. There are things out there that we can go look at. I want to thank Jim, who said, here's kind of our first set of numbers, but I'm bowing out. I'm not going to get into this any further until you've had a chance to talk with your council about what the options are. He does not want to cloud any of these choices. He wants you to make the choice that you think is best and best suited for the town of Basalt. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bruce with only 3 other caveats. The land has to be purchased in 2 parts. If you believe that the big B is important, there's a part piece that has to be purchased, and it can't be that the developer purchases it because it doesn't yield any income related to the project. It just creates more barriers for the development, whoever the developer is. The second is there isn't an option that Bruce is going to show you that doesn't have public participation. Whether it's a park, it has public participation, and if it's 75,000 square feet, it has public participation. It's picking the level of reimbursement that you, the town council, want, and the level of development that you're willing to accept. And it's really just measuring those two things. If it's all park, well, this is what it costs, and we can tell you what it costs. If it's got some development, this is what it costs. But be under no illusion, there is nothing that pays for itself now without the town participating.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Council. It's good to be here. Bruce Kimmel with Ellers.
You
And
like
my
the weather,
first-
right?
Excuse me?
You like the weather? It's
I
just
love the
like
weather,
home.
yeah.
but-
Just like home, yeah. My first time with your new computer setup here. So Mike did a really nice overview of what we looked at, and I'm not going to take too much time because I want to give you time to ask questions and give feedback and ideas for further analysis if you see fit to do that. But it was a fun analysis to sink our teeth into, and we appreciate the opportunity. So, and is this the clicker?
No.
You did it. Bruce, you got it.
Oh, you've got it. So you'll just watch my screen and then, okay, very good. Playing
This new computer system.
telegraph, yeah, there you go.
Pretty
So what I'd like to start with is just a quick overview of how the land use planning ideas have evolved. Mike gave you an overview of that, so I won't spend too much time on that. But what was really interesting to me as the financial advisor is how it became apparent as I did this research and this analysis that we have some catching up to do in terms of the fiscal planning as it relates to the CDC parcel. I'll go into then the 3 redevelopment scenarios that we did look at with different levels of density on the western portion of the CDC parcel. I'm going to give you a few ideas on putting the town's cost and benefit equation with redevelopment into a broader financial context, and then also share some other ideas on publicly driven and privately driven redevelopment, because we've heard in recent months a lot of debate and discussion about should this be a private endeavor, should this be a public endeavor, and as someone who works with communities in quite a few places on both publicly led efforts and privately led efforts, I have some ideas that hopefully will be of use to you on that front. And then I want to just end with some options for next steps, and again, get your feedback and direction on how to go forward.
Bruce, can I interrupt 1 second?
Yes.
I know we kicked off a little bit late, but we've also only got about an hour scheduled for this. So I'm wondering, initially, I think if we'd kicked off at 4, we were hoping to maybe have the presentation part be about 20 and have us be able to ask questions for about 40. Do you think we could, where are we really on this?
I can get through this in easily 10 minutes if I go
If I
fast.
shut up, you could go. All right, go.
Please stop
Sorry.
if you have questions along the way.
Right.
And you'll all have this PowerPoint too. But to my earliest point, I think what's really striking is from when the town and the CDC first announced their partnership, the idea for buying the Pan and Fork in late 2010, all the way through to really the end of last year before the DAC released its work, the redevelopment plans that informed the town's other decisions, including on financing, included redevelopment that ran the length of the CDC parcel. That wasn't to say that there weren't view corridors and other green space in there, but it really spanned the entire length of the CDC parcel. And a few of the points along the way are represented here. And then it was really in late 2014 up until today that you really started to see the land use evolve, and a little bit of that disconnect start to appear as it related to the fiscal plan. As you're aware, the DAC endorsed what I'm calling the little v view plane. P&Z expanded on that to create more of the big V. And last summer, as you know, just a few months ago, you endorsed that concept of development on the western portion and open space on the eastern portion of the CDC parcel. So what's happened then is that the land use planning that's happened really in the past 12 months has effectively reduced the footprint of what we're looking at and what could generate revenues for the town going forward, as well as reimbursements up front, has really been reduced by 40 to 50%. And I'm approaching that from a value neutral perspective. As your financial advisor, I'm here to help you realize whatever priorities you choose to pursue. But it's a really striking difference in what we're looking at in terms of land use, and we have to think about how that relates to the fiscal plan. The fiscal plan that was established in 2013, you'll recall all those meetings you had in July and August of 2013 leading to the ballot question were to use post dollars, general fund cash as well, and then to issue both tax-exempt and taxable bonds for both the public use and private use that was contemplated for the Pan and Fork, and that was about $5 million. When you looked at repayment of those bonds, the plan was to use post dollars to repay the tax-exempt bonds for the most part. Those were post-eligible expenses. And then for the 2014, the taxable bonds, the repayment plan was to use general property and sales taxes during the near term. And then ideally, once some redevelopment did happen on the CDC parcel, you would use that reimbursement that would be negotiated as part of the redevelopment process to reimburse the town and pay off the bonds early. Looking at the town investment in the RFCDC parcel, and you've seen these numbers before, including when we met back in April, the town has spent about $2.5 million out of the $7.5 million total on costs that are reimbursable from the CDC parcel. That's the number that Mike referenced earlier. If you look at direct site improvements, improvements made directly to the CDC parcel, it was about 1.25 million. So that's about half of the 2.5. And then the other 50% of the 2.5 million are agreed upon proration of river restoration and resident relocation costs. So that's the makeup of the 2.5 reimbursement that's part of the fiscal plan.
2013 fiscal plan.
The 2013 fiscal plan, right. So then with that backdrop, with that background information, let's talk about the redevelopment scenarios. So as Mike mentioned, we really sought to give a high-level forecast of the town's costs and benefits, both upfront and over time, with 3 different development scenarios. This isn't based on any specific proposal. We did use a recent Low Enterprises proposal to inform the first scenario, but we made some changes to that. And since you're not in a pre-development agreement with Low or with the CDC, we felt it was appropriate to really expand on the vision from the P&Z land use option 3E1 as opposed to going with a previous
Excuse me,
proposal.
Chris.
Yes,
Say we were or are not in a pre-development.
you are
agreement.
not.
So Lowe's did not sign that pre-development
Correct.
agreement that the council passed.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It's also not a definitive market-ready analysis, and I think we have some good assumptions in there, but if you wanted to go down this road further and really dig in, we would want to take this to a different level of detail and documenting and footnoting. When you go to do an underwriting of a bond or a bank financing, you have to have sort of market-ready documentation of all your assumptions, and these are more general, but we think they're a good ballpark of what would be realistic for these 3 different scenarios. And also, I just want to reiterate, this is really focusing on town finances. We didn't try to look at spin-off effects or multiplier effects or anything of that nature. So the 3 scenarios that we looked at were a 75,000 square foot condo hotel proposal. The land use massing would be modeled on the P&Z endorsed concept. Again, that's known as option 3E1. We looked then at a 35,000 square foot condominium development. That was originally something that a member of the community had suggested that the town look at. We took it to a different level, looking at some specific development happening in Basalt, and then made some tweaks on that to come up with what we think is a very good proxy for 100% residential development that would take about, or put about 35,000 square feet of building in play there. And then we also looked at a really pure open space, pure community type of use with a 5,000 square foot event center that the town would be responsible for developing. So Mike stole my thunder here a little bit with these next couple of points, but I really want to emphasize that, again, I'm here to share these thoughts with you. I'm not saying that the town is in trouble. I'm not saying that the town has to go one way or the other. These are just, as we see them, developing realities with the type of land use that you are settling on with our town planning process. The first is that really no scenario from 75,000 square feet down to 5,000 square feet is likely to recoup your full 2.5 million of reimbursable costs. As much as I would like to say it would, unless you added much more density on that half of the parcel, I think you'd be hard pressed to find any developer that was willing on a fair market basis to provide you with the full $2.5 million. Now you can sway that, and our written report that we'll have to you talks about, you will get building permits, you will get other fees that could help make up some of that gap. You could also use TIF or another tax incentive to maybe try to negotiate more money up front in exchange for more tax incentives over time. But on a pure basis, as we'll discuss further in a little bit, you're really looking at recouping maybe a little more than half of that up front, or less than that, depending on the lower density scenarios. The other truth, as we see it, is that all scenarios are likely to require additional town investment. And we've outlined some of these points here. Acquiring the eastern half of the CDC parcel for public use, developing amenities, or at least the kind of green space that you want to see there will require some dollars as well. Certainly, developing an event center will require a lot more money up front. And then there's maintenance costs, right? There's all the Parks and Rec upkeep, as well as event space upkeep that would go with operating that kind of center. And then, as Mike alluded to, we did try to factor in structured and surface parking into these scenarios, as well as accounting for at least a little bit some of the street and sidewalk improvements that would be required with this development. So really, the differences between these scenarios isn't in whether you're going to need to make some kind of an investment. It's in the amount of the investment, where those dollars come from, right? Is it from existing tax resources or incremental new resources that would be generated by development? How long you need to make that investment, and what's the overall cost-benefit equation for the town? So then looking specifically at the three scenarios, again, starting with the 75,000 square foot condo hotel approach, we assumed that the town would have to make another $2 million investment above and beyond what you invested already in parkland acquisition and development, plus some amount of annual maintenance cost. You would be recouping new property sales and lodging taxes from that proposal. And then we did assume that you would be dedicating 50% of those incremental new taxes in some form of an incentive arrangement to buy down the cost of structured parking. That's a swag at this point, but we felt that it was a reasonable proxy just to give you a feel for the fact that this wouldn't be all new taxes coming to the town's coffers. There would have to be some amount of tax sharing, most likely, to cover the extraordinary expense involved with structured parking. So then when you factor that in, and also the town's previous expenses as it relates to the CDC parcel, and that's the debt on the 2014 bonds and a small amount of the debt on the 2013 bonds, you run an average deficit, if you will, where you're looking at all expenses compared to all revenues of about $114,000 a year for the first 15 years. That's a cumulative deficit of about $2.2 million. Now, as you'll see with all of these, when you look on a year-by-year basis, by the end of 15 years, you're coming into the black on all of these scenarios, but it's a matter of, what level of startup investment is the town willing to do, and how do you want to try to mitigate the risk in making those investments?
Bruce, quick question.
Yes.
The parking needed for that type of development is included in the developer costs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Because they're gonna have to, the development will have to create a significant amount of parking for the development.
Right, and then we are factoring in using a TIF to buy down that cost. Yep. And I know you probably have questions on lots of the details, and our written materials will give you that information in probably overload detail, but I'm trying to hit some of the high points so you can see the differences between these scenarios.
These numbers include that TIF you just mentioned?
Yes. Yep. So if we weren't paying on that TIF, if the town wasn't having to make a TIF contribution, you would be positive, you would have a much more positive outlook on that first scenario. So that scenario depresses your returns because it's assuming you are transferring those tax revenues to the developer. With scenario 2, this is the private condominium approach. We base that on some development that's happening right now in Basalt we bumped up the taxable values assumed for property tax purposes based on the fact that this would be on the riverfront. But we assumed a little more investment in upfront parkland acquisition and maintenance. Of course, you would have property taxes. You wouldn't have to be making investment of taxes in structured parking. We would assume that the developer would pay for all of their tuck under and surface parking as part of the development costs. But because you really are only looking at property taxes, and because frankly the town tax level is so low in terms of your mill rate, you still have a big deficit with this scenario, right? So your average deficit is about $260,000 over the first 15 years, cumulative deficit of just under $5 million. That's factoring in, again, your previous commitments, plus what you would do new, and the tax revenues that you would generate, plus development fees and some upfront reimbursement. And so then the last scenario, the event center, really presents the most challenges in giving a good forecast because of the wide range of development and operating costs that we see. Also market demand, pricing for events, pricing for food and catering and other services, and what kind of arrangements you would have for capturing profits off of that, as well as future competition from other providers in this area. But we took a look at a number of different scenarios, and frankly, I think I came up with a somewhat optimistic scenario here. I don't feel like this is overly conservative. We assumed a $7.5 million investment in parkland acquisition and the event center. Plus, we made assumptions for operations and maintenance. We assumed no new property taxes, as this would be a publicly owned building, but we did assume sales taxes. We assumed that there would have to be some nominal expense at least, or really investment in surface parking as part of the parcel development costs. And with all those costs, because of that upfront expense in developing the event center, you're looking at an annual deficit of about $526,000 over the first 15 years and a cumulative deficit of just under $10 million. So if you look at on the annual deficits and surpluses on a year-by-year basis, you can see the trend line runs as such. The blue bar is the 75,000 square foot condo hotel. You can see the initial spike with both the reimbursement of town costs as well as building permit fees. And then you can see how it goes negative after that spike because you're still paying debt service on both your existing debt as well as new park debt. But then you can see you get pretty close to even and then positive over the last 3 years of this 15-year time horizon. The red bar is the 35,000 square foot scenario, smaller amount of initial spike with reimbursements and development fees, a little bit more of a deficit, and then it gets to roughly the same point, a little bit lower as the larger scenario. And then you can see with the event center, pretty significant deficits in the initial years as you're paying that cost of debt service. And then over time, once that debt service goes off, you actually come out a little bit above the other two in terms of annual returns. But you've accumulated a fair amount of cumulative deficit at that point. So those are some of the dynamics in play as we see them with these different development scenarios. Last couple of slides, Mayor. Broader context. This is something that I really was glad for the timing of this discussion, that it came at the same time as the financial forecast, because you've really got some striking decisions ahead of you as a council, not only about this parcel, but about what else you want to accomplish. And with lower density, you know, any of these three scenarios are lower density than what was originally contemplated. And so you have to revisit, first and foremost, the 2013 fiscal plan for the CDC parcel and figure out how to fund your public space acquisition, the development of that space, and the maintenance of that space. That net cost is going to be less for scenario 1 than it is going to be for scenario 3, but it's going to be a significant expense in any scenario. And then you really have to figure out how to put that new plan into a broader context. And using that new financial forecast as a baseline, I would point out that the financial forecast does not include any new investments in streets, the underpass, affordable housing, daycare, and any other general fund backed priorities that you might have. You have a lot of competing interests in this town. I've sat through a lot of meetings where people have said, we need to work on this, we need to work on that, and they're all really valid requests. I can't say that a trail on Two Rivers Road isn't important, or daycare, or any of the other things that people are saying they want to make this a better community. But that's not in your 5-year plan currently, and those would all be backed with sales taxes and property taxes. You're really lucky that you have post dollars that you can put towards a lot of these things. Post is a wonderful resource, but you can only stretch those post dollars so far. And then as Rick often says, you have to worry about maintaining those resources as well. So it's a consideration. Also, as Mike alluded to, you're below your general fund balance target. It's by no means a crisis situation, but I think you want to try to figure out how to start building that back up to the 1/3 reserve target. And with less CDC parcel reimbursement, that's just gonna make that job of building up the fund balance harder for you as a council. That said, you have options. In addition to looking at development, you can look at taxes and fees. That's certainly an option, and or reprioritizing other parts of the general fund budget. You know, just because you have this forecast doesn't mean you can't change the trend lines in some other areas of your budget. So then finally, and this is something that I feel really strongly about from my experience on other public and private projects. I've heard a lot of people talking about, well, this needs to stay public. Well, no, we need to have private use on this. And I think that that kind of focus and rhetoric is really misleading, because the private sector can deliver public goods and the public sector can deliver private goods. I work on many, many affordable housing projects that public sector entities take on. And I work on lots of public-private partnerships where public and private entities, are doing park and rec type of activities and other things that you would think would typically be public responsibilities. What I would say is that your focus really should be on what land use is desired and feasible, both to develop upfront and to sustain over time right here in Basalt on this parcel. I think if you focus first and foremost on that question, what is feasible and what do you want, and really with a clear sense of the trade-offs and the benefits, because there's no perfect solution here. You're not gonna make everyone happy, and there's, as you know, even with the development scenario, it might have the best looking numbers, but there's probably gonna need to be some TIF required, and for some people, TIF is really something that they would rather not contemplate. So there's no silver bullet here, but I think if you can look at land use and figure out what you think is sustainable and what you want there, then we can look at which sector has the best capacity to get that project done. Looking at your risk and reward upfront and over time, and also realizing that your priorities and your desire for risk mitigation can be accomplished through land use planning, as well as whatever incentive agreements that you might negotiate. So if you want open space in certain areas, if you want other amenities, if you want certain things in place with a private sector developer, you can negotiate those into the agreement. The last thing I would say is that I would urge you not to, whatever course of approach you take, know that you need developers. If it's not here, you need them other places. And so I would just encourage the focus to stay on what you want and not, should this be a private use or a public use, because you can get to where you want to go with either approach. And that's all I had, with the exception of a few next steps. I think there might be some room for further deliberation. There's certainly some fiscal factors that you'll probably want to think about, both specific to this site as well as in the broader context of the town's forecast and budget. You can, if you wish, dig into a specific type and ask us and other consultants to go further with that, thinking about how best to get it done and to balance your risk and reward. You can seek to re-engage the CDC and Low in discussions if you want to go down a road that you think they would want to pursue. Or if you're prepared to lead the way on an initiative, you can think about how you want to engage with other partners and think about how to ask the CDC and Low to step aside. Or you can decide to do nothing and let the CDC figure it out. And I'm not saying that in jest, that is always an option. This is not your responsibility, it's the CDC's parcel. Our one recommendation is to get the financial plan in sync with the land use plan and with your other town dynamics, so that as you think about funding for affordable housing and streets and underpasses, this isn't out of step with all those other very important parts of your budget. So thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks,
Okay, Herschel was first.
The two sizes of the development scenarios, you didn't take into account, like which side of Two Rivers Road a development would go.
No, we assumed everything would be on some portion of that western part of the CDC parcel.
Okay, and so these numbers don't investigate using some land on the other side of Two Rivers Road.
Right, and Herschel, I'm glad you mentioned that. The first bullet says deliberate on other parcel land use options with adjacent areas. That is something that we talked about back in April.
Right.
As a possible third way. And our scope really focused on the western part of the CDC parcel.
And then my other question was, if some version of the Visual V actually happens, it mandates moving the city hall and acquiring or renting other property. Has that been looked at all in this context?
Not in this context, no.
You know, that also would be, I'm assuming, a significant town investment.
Yes, although the redevelopment that you could achieve on Lions Park might also offset a fair amount of that investment. I really think that's an exciting opportunity, but for this analysis, we could only introduce so many variables.
Thank you.
What, you know, you've projected that something will happen in 5 years. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, in all of these scenarios, we assumed that construction would occur in 2017, or that, so you would work through the land use and planning and strategy process next year. Something would happen in 2017, whatever it is, and then incremental new taxes for the scenarios that developed taxes would start in 2018.
What happens if it doesn't go that way?
Sure. Your existing obligations, as Judy would be the first to tell you, you would keep using post dollars and then general tax dollars to pay the debt service on your 2013 and 2014 bonds.
That would affect our other plans for other infrastructure?
It could, unless you did something about revenues or expenses.
In other words, another bond or look at the
tax.
budget.
Or change
a new
taxes
tax.
and expenses,
Oh.
yeah.
There's a do-nothing scenario that kind of ends up being a cost to the community as well. To get the other things we've talked about, affordable housing, underpass, connectivity to trails, improvements to Two Rivers Road, all those other things that are, you know, kind of lined up behind this scenario. Okay, what happens, the TIF would make it, I assume, more affordable? In other words, if we went with the 35,000 square feet of condos with no TIF and no public subsidy, what would the cost of a townhome be versus, you know, would it double? Would it be 40% more? Let's say it's
So-
$1 million with a TIF and a public participation with CDC to buy that land back and start that process, and then, you know, we came in and we did 35,000 free market, you know, square feet of free market real estate. What would that look like? Would it be 2 million, 3 million?
I mean,
It would be less affordable than if we had TIF and all the other stuff in place from the End user?
Well, for the end user, it would be less affordable, yes, because the loss of that tax incentive would make that cost higher. And so what we were assuming based on our analysis of the numbers is that the developer would say they can't take on the risk without some cost mitigation on the structured parking. But yeah, if they could charge the higher purchase price per square foot per unit, that's how they would have to make it up, is in that direction.
Is this all in your report?
Yes.
Okay. Because it's so hard to make assumptions
It
based on
is,
what
and I
don't
realized
know.
I didn't even get into what our assumptions were on the specific amount of the redevelopment or the reimbursement in permits and fees. That's all in the number zone. We can call out those key variables, especially to show you how the three scenarios differ from each other.
Yeah, because I mean, that's, to me, that's kind of the meat of this whole thing. It makes sense on a upper level for me, but I need some more detail on what you were thinking about parking and the cost back and the permit fees and, because obviously in a 35,000 square foot development, you also have some affordable housing mitigation in there, correct? Or no?
Yes, it's there, but it's kind of in brackets, and it's sort of in brackets on the 75,000 as well,
Okay.
because there's so many different ways that you can meet that affordable housing requirement.
And also, when we did the replacement housing ordinance, we allowed the town council to weigh in on giving credit for all the replacement housing.
Right.
So that's kind of a negotiated number, and that's a place where the council has some flexibility. Because we wrote that in to encourage people to relocate the residents rather than kick them out.
But the town relocated the resident,
Right.
not the developer. So you wouldn't,
But-
how does the town get credit for what it did?
You seek reimbursement from the developer for the
Right,
amount.
so that's the cost I was trying to see that's included in the, okay, I'll read the, I'll read the whole thing.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah, Tom?
It's in the 2.5.
It would seem to me that on the $2.5 million reimbursement that's up in the air, wouldn't that affect the town's investment under the, I assume under the third option, you're waiving it, since you're,
Correct.
under the first two options, how does that reimbursement factor?
We assume it's cash reimbursement in 2017.
All of it, 100%?
No, in the first scenario, we assume 1.5 million.
I see.
In the second scenario, we assume 1 million.
That comes back to the town. I see, okay.
Rob?
Yeah, Bruce. Your scenario two or envisioned a 35,000 square foot, you called it condos.
Yeah.
How married are you to that idea, or how much will these numbers change if it's a hotel, a restaurant, a bar?
I'm glad you raised that. I know a lot of people have been interested in the polygon. And we did not expressly factor a polygon in. We think that's kind of on the margins. If you had a more commercial use added into a scenario two, you would have obviously some sales tax that would be generated where we don't have that currently in option two. I think you would have to look at exactly what that would look like with a combination of residential and commercial and see if that's really something from a land use perspective that you think makes sense.
How about condo versus hotel?
Well, the first scenario is a condo hotel approach where people are buying these units and then opting into, renting them through a hotel-like format. And with that, you do get, property taxes, sales tax, and lodging tax. With condos, you just get the property tax. So that's one of the biggest differences, in addition to the square footage difference, is that that hotel option is a pretty significant driver of revenues.
Bernie?
Yeah, but
Rick.
Rob, I'm not sure I
I'm not
answered your
sure.
question.
So the question is, if what you called a condo at 35,000 square feet was a condo hotel, how much does that change your
Oh.
numbers?
Well, we could run that scenario. I think the concern we had about a condo hotel that was only 35,000 square feet is the number of keys that would be involved and whether a developer would find that viable to do with the costs associated with this site.
That's kind of the question I want answered,
Okay.
as you make a list of
17
questions for us.
units.
Bernie, then Rick?
Yeah, going along with what Rob said, other than sheer size giving you a lot more units to rent, I'm not sure I understand the difference between a condo hotel and a condominium project that has an active rental pool. In either case, it's not one ownership renting out small spaces for nightly. It's owners who determine when they're using or not using. Some may be second home owners, some may choose to live there. So I'd like a little more clarification on the financial
Sure.
repercussions of each approach.
Okay, we will elaborate on that.
Rick, was that the end of your question, Bernie?
Back to affordability, I just find myself struggling with getting locked into any one of these three. Some believe that increasing real estate values on the adjacent parcels is a good idea. And at the end of the day, I'd be interested in seeing, some sort of a way of calculating what it does to affordability in terms of something that's a little denser, that has affordable housing built into it, that has office space that, I mean, the less we have, the more expensive it becomes. And how does that look as far as sustaining downtown, If it continues to, there was a comment today in the paper about Basalt really has cheap rents compared to Up Valley. I'm sure that's the truth. But are we setting ourselves up for a very expensive downtown core that, turns out to be not attainable by the people that want to come here and open a business or a store or buy a small affordable unit or a free market rental? I mean, is there a way to calculate that? As this happens, this is affordable. As this happens, this becomes less, and there's a scales of, when's the tipping point, where it just becomes impossible?
It is, but we're verging on needing to get into a lot more layers of details to get in. I think you're asking a really crucial question, and we can certainly, there's no reason why we had to just stop at 75,000, and we can look at different, configurations that might yield more return and therefore allow for more affordable housing as part of the mix. I guess we just need direction on, what you're wanting us to look at and how you see this fitting into your bigger deliberations on how to move forward. We can certainly work on the things that we're comfortable analyzing. We can certainly engage with other folks that might have more economic analysis and market research expertise. There's things that we can do. I guess it's just a question of how does this council want to move forward? And right now you're not talking with any developers. That's one option, or if you feel strongly about going in a different direction, I think your staff would say that we're all ready to, take that direction and help you pursue that.
Bruce, I'm gonna say thank you because we do have a contingent from
Sure.
elsewhere that's waiting to meet with us, but I think we're all at somewhat of a disadvantage because maybe some of the questions we're asking were in the report, the more dense things. And I was pleased that you said at the end of this whole thing is that decide what you want, if it's viable, and whether you want it to be built by the public sector, the private sector, or a combination thereof, because there are other visions floating around out there other than these. So for whoever said, I hope we're not married to this, this is not even what this is about. This was about picking, large, medium, small, public versus private kind of look at this thing, and I don't think it's necessarily what any of us would have actually looked at, but it gives us an idea. I think we get the report, we can talk about it further, and I really appreciate you
Sure.
working so hard on this.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bruce. Good stuff.
Okay, our next group is a meeting with Pickens County Commissioners. food gonna be in here?
If I did that, I'd be up on that piece
Yeah.
of that up there.
With the commissioners. Pam, are we gonna go in there or bring the food out here to talk to the commissioners?
Good answer, you got it. Not the answer I was looking for, but
God, no, I wouldn't wanna get mismatched at all, no way.
Oh, it's not here? Is that, oh, okay. So is it for the commissioners?
Mic test, number 8. How about from here? Does this sound good? Test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2.
Waiting for grassroots and she's gonna give me I got a thumbs up, so we're on, we are on. I'm glad you guys could come, and I know that probably our managers put our agenda together, but it's pretty obvious what we're talking about, right? 3 major things that we talk about almost every time we get together. But the first one is the Basalt Avenue underpass, and I'm gonna let Mike talk about that.
Basalt Avenue Underpass, a project that started at 3.1 million and has grown to the precious number of 8 million. We've gotten over 2 million in CDOT funding, 750,000 from the Elected Officials Transportation Committee Council. The town has committed 2.5 million, have a request into Eagle County for an additional $500,000, which leaves us somewhere around $1 million to $1.5 million shortfall. And I think the thing that we see is there is a pending application for an affordable housing project. And if you've just driven this intersection in the morning, especially in the morning, but also at night and when school lets out, it just doesn't, it's starting not to work at all. And to think that we would introduce more housing into an intersection that doesn't work is concerning. And then we have another proposal for affordable housing or inclusionary housing from a developer across from the high school, the old continuing care retirement center facility, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 140 units, which is a mixture of apartments, row homes, and single-family homes. So the idea is if that has to be sort of the number 1 on our list as we go forward, because a lot of our potential affordable housing is really tied to that intersection. Think of the Stubby's parcel, that's the Real America parcel that's on the north side of 82. And the idea was putting affordable housing there limits the need for cars so that people can use RAPID because the RAPID stops right there. But again, if the people continue to cross in the morning, if you've ever been there, the people, when they hit the button and they cross from one direction, by the time the next group gets over, you can't make a right turn going up valley. And as Tom Smith will attest to,
If he could attest.
if he was here, he would tell you it took him 10 minutes to get out of the Big Oak parking lot just on the few lane to get over, to get to the intersection. And that took him 15 minutes to navigate this morning, which was, I don't know, 250, 300 feet.
So I don't know what you
Oh.
guys, if you talk about this or if it's just us talking about it, but
Do you guys have a transportation impact fee to develop funding for these sort of things on any of your commercial or residential development?
no.
So you,
Everything in the south side is paid a pedestrian connection fee. Well,
You need to be on the mic, the grassroots, I'm getting the signals from the back of the room.
thank you.
okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if you had a transportation impact fee, and we've heard from Susan that the south side did. You know, it's always awkward to say, well, the last guy in the gate should pay for 100% of the impacts of those prior. And then, of course, all the impacts are going to accrue both from developments up and down Highway 82 as well as there, you know, in terms of how long you need to stage the lights. So you probably are aware that when the BRT was formed and the RTA was formed, Pitkin County's share of the revenues was dedicated towards making that system work. And so while Snowmass receives a small bit of revenues back for future capital and Aspen receives a small bit back for future capital, we don't have an accruing pot for future capital out of that program. That was a deal made to make the numbers all work back in 2000 before that vote.
And then Mike, on the underpass, you guys have been doing some value engineering.
Correct.
And so, where do you see the number potentially coming closer to when it goes out to bid?
We would hope 7.25 to 7.5, somewhere in there. But the problem is there's no guarantee. I mean, what we're seeing in terms of escalation in construction costs, there's really no guarantee. And the fear is, as you raise money, you almost encourage your number to be the number that you've raised money for. Because all these are public deliberations. They know how much that you've acquired or accumulated.
Yeah, George?
Well, the underpass obviously is a huge safety issue, but it's not going to really alleviate the traffic issue. That intersection basically is at failure. And so you're still going to have the traffic issues whether if you just keep the status quo, right? Because it's a failed intersection. So it sort of goes hand in hand, but it's a separate topic.
Well, Mike can explain this better, but one of the major problems is if you're coming from the south side and you want to turn right, you have to wait for all the straighties to go.
No, I understand,
no
I
right hand.
understand.
Yeah.
So the intersection's failed.
It is.
And so, long-term, you may need to think about a roundabout for funding. But in terms of funding for the underpass, I would do a couple things. One, I would up the request to Eagle County right off the bat. I mean, when you think about City of Aspen, Snowman's Village are participating down here, which we were very, very pleased to get their support through the LTC. That should send a signal to Eagle County. And the second thing is when we had a shortfall with our underpass, we were constantly in touch with, at that time, Joe Elson with CDOT, because monies do show up when other projects don't come online, and all of a sudden, there's money that's found that's sitting there, but it's something you have to be constantly in touch with.
Right.
The contact is CDOT.
Yeah. So
And
Brian,
it may even be that we may be able to find some additional funding through the TPR with some money that's not being used, and we could lobby for that. So there's opportunities, but I think the main point is to try to get a hard number too.
Right, we just about have to get a hard number somewhere along the way. I guess our biggest concern, because we talked about this the other night, is the fact that here we are with a BRT station right at town, and we can't really encourage transit-oriented development because we can't send more people walking across that highway. It just doesn't make any sense at all. So we really need to sit on this until we get this figured out, and hopefully these numbers stop going up.
So are you thinking about a moratorium on growth that would impact that highway?
We didn't really say the M word, no.
Okay, I'm
You
just kind of
know-
wondering what not accepting applications mean, or how do you mean?
Well, in
proceed?
reality, we have to accept applications. I mean, you have to do that, so.
Unless you have a moratorium.
Unless you put a moratorium.
Right.
Well, and then one of the other things is, it's been in the papers, and one of the big connectivity things is also, this is a huge connectivity between one side of the trail system to the other side of the trail system. So, Howie would kill me for bringing this up, but he mentioned about, is this an ask for an open space and trails type of contribution because of the connection? It is a huge trail connection. I mean, we send people across from, if you want to go to the Basalt Snowmass to the Rio Grande at the high school, you've got to cross that highway. So, I mean, that's just, it's one of those things when you start looking at trying to find every way possible to fund it, you gotta look at what this truly connects. Because I use it a decent amount when I'm using the bus, and, I have stopped running across the street, but, at the wrong time. But you sit there and you watch this lovely BRT coming, and it's supposed to be fast, fun, and frequent. And, when you get there and you watch a bus go by, it's not so much fun. It's not very frequent because all of a sudden I have to wait another 15 minutes. And, then the fast goes out. It's easier for me to drive. I mean, I can almost get to Public Works by the time that happens. So, to me, it's just like trying to help find a way to fund this would be huge. And I think it would be a huge safety thing. And, that's why I think it's being brought up, is not asking you, please fund it for us, but just to be as creative and help us be as creative as possible to find funding.
Rachel?
Yeah, and I certainly didn't mean to diminish that. I was just trying to say we don't really have that sort of capacity. We had to kind of beg Aspen and Snowmass just to fund the underpass under the airport, and how connected is that to the town and their guests and everything there. We're all struggling like this because our own state Department of Transportation doesn't have the money it should have for making safe highways or adequate highways. And we've raised that as an issue with Colorado Counties, Inc. this year, to ask them to do a referred measure in 2016 for 10 cents a gallon gasoline tax increase. And that got kind of talked down to having a transportation summit during the winter conference and seeing where it goes from there, because as I'm sure you're all aware, the Front Range really wants to do a 1% sales tax. They'd like a statewide 1% sales tax, which is really very difficult for resort communities. And you'll later have the argument, well, we raise 80% of the money on the Front Range, we're going to spend 80% of the dollars there.
Right.
But they are going to try to keep advancing that issue. And then Clear is hosting a transportation summit on November 19th coming up. So there seems to be some momentum coming forward by parties, whether it's the price of gasoline being so low or people acknowledging their projects are 40 years off in the TPR regions, limited funding. And through CCI, it is, of course, just rumor mill at this point, but they have said that some of the large organizations like Move Colorado have said that they are going to work for their legislators to put a ballot question forward in 2016 for a gasoline tax increase. And I think that one of the real keys here to watch is last year at the very, very end of the session, a bill came forward to create a reissuance of the trans bonds, the transportation revenue anticipation notes that we haven't paid off yet from 20 years ago. They want to reissue those in 2018 with no new revenue source, and what they pulled up to use as the project list was going to be what the TPRs have been planning with extremely limited funds and limited things. So the only thing on the Highway 82 corridor from Glenwood up last year proposed to be funded by the next $3 billion bond was $1.5 million for the Basalt underpass. And so it was just like, wait a second, our TPR needs a lot more than that, and so does Highway 82. 2/3 or more, $2 billion of the $3 billion, we're going to be spent essentially on I-25 and in Weld County. So, if we don't pay attention as small rural areas, we are really going to be left out of the scene when they do fix it at CDOT.
Herschel?
Yeah, George, we know that the underpass isn't going to solve the traffic at that intersection. We've talked about, yes, there's a better solution, there's a better actually connector to South Side, but in order to get that even going, now we're talking 5 to 10 years out. And so what's then, as far as I'm concerned, lend some credibility to this underpass is that the safety issue can't wait that long.
Yeah.
I mean, I like this other intersection idea. I've been nagging everybody about it, but it's out there too far for the danger that's on that highway.
It's really true.
Yes, sir.
If that intersection needs to be totally rebuilt, and if we put the pedestrian underpass in, that could preclude some of the solutions of making the car part wider for turning lanes, or putting in a roundabout, or that sort of a thing. So it's almost like, should we take one step back and make sure that the pedestrian underpass, as it's designed there, is exactly what we need, or is that going to change the whole car scenario in the future in some unintended direction?
Patty?
On a personal note, I was working at Mountain Greenway using that intersection. I was working at the Emporium using that intersection day and night, summer, winter. My daughter uses it twice a day, going to the Hobby Farm preschool. It's a very serious, dangerous intersection. I think the priority at hand is fixing that and having all of us sitting at this table work to find creative funding solutions, thinking out of the box. And I don't think we want to, I understand the concerns about any future development in Southside, but We also have housing needs, so do we shoot one horse in the foot and shoot them both in the foot at the same time? You know, I don't know, but I think that we need to work together on this. We're not gonna solve the transportation issues on a statewide level, the funding. What we need to do is protect public safety and get that underpass in ASAP before the construction costs even go higher.
Okay, thanks, Patty. Should we move on? Because I know.
Just one quick comment. I agree with what you said, Herschel, that transportation is a long-term solution.
Yeah.
The underpass, it is the right place because it's right at the BRT stops. That's where it needs to go. And I think once you get a hard number, I think maybe we need to invite another partner in with this conversation. That's Eagle County.
And we'll help you.
Agree entirely.
We can do that. Okay, Whitewater Park and River Rec Plan. John, okay,
Yeah,
John.
and I will quickly turn this over. We have representatives here from our Healthy Rivers and Streams program, but I know this has been an ongoing discussion, and we thought it would be good for us to have just an opportunity to all sit down together and talk about how this is moving forward and how we'd like it to move forward. So, with that, Laura?
You want to speak?
Sure.
I think you just need to be at a mic.
Here, why don't we switch places?
So Laura Maker with the Pitkin County Attorney's Office. This is a project that Pitkin County's been working on for the better part of a decade. You know, after the early 2000s, the drought situation that was going on, Pitkin County looked at basically the area above the frying pan, which was more or less all dried up, not how everybody wants to see it, and was looking at ways that we can re-water that stretch and really keep our rivers and streams healthy. And so one of the approaches that the county took was to obtain a legal water right for a recreational in-channel diversion. The idea being that you can call water to that area and hopefully re-water that stretch to some extent before the frying pan is coming in. So while we've been working on this for the better part of a decade, we're finally coming to, you know, the physical structures that are needed to effectuate the water right. And so I've got Jason Carey here from River Restoration, who's been a contractor for the county working on this project since more or less the beginning, who can give you a sense of the history and what's really going on there. You know, we really do think that this has the potential to be, you know, the river entrance Whitewater Park to Basalt, and that's really exciting.
Okay, just, I don't want to stop you from further presentation, but I think most of us got a grand presentation. We walked the area, we
Right.
know kind of pretty sincerely what is going on and why.
Great.
Why
Well,
that's
Jason's
going
just
on.
here as a resource then.
Okay, so I just think that one of the issues that some of us had was that it was kind of short notice at the beginning, but then it turned out because of trout fishery stuff, that this is gonna be put out there a little ways and give us plenty of time to do the kind of public process and design work that really needs to be done. And I've talked to George about this a little bit too, because I see him like every day, that needs really the assistance of professionals who do park planning and public process and all those good things, because we're not at all concerned that we don't need this. We definitely support it, you know, the whole idea of it. We just, well, especially me, I haven't heard too much from these guys, but when I went out there and stood and looked at the situation there with the narrow road and rush hour traffic and no way to get down to the river, and really, right there, you know, so I think we understand that, and I think we're on the path of putting together the best plan for not only that piece, but potentially downtown, which I think would be the greatest asset to us, is to have the put in down there and have further play in downtown Basalt.
Jackie, can I make a comment?
Yeah.
It's my understanding that you very wisely suggested having 2-3 public meetings, which I think is a great idea. And in talking with Gary, because I see him almost every day, I threw out an idea of actually hiring a consultant, somebody who can come in and organize the public process for
Right.
us. I also so I think that's something we definitely need to look at. And as far as, I'm just gonna cut right to the chase, as far as funding, getting back to the dollars again, because I think this is a huge economic driver for Basalt, which I think is incredible, I think we need to be talking to somebody with Northwest Colorado Council of Governments about economic development funding. There might be some opportunities out there on a national level that we can hook into for some economic development dollars.
Are you still at COG?
Yes, I'm still at COG.
Oh, how convenient.
And I was at the meeting. I'm going to drag you to the next one, even if it's by phone. But I'll get you in touch. I'm actually vice chair of the Economic Development District Board. So I have that kind of inside loop. And so hopefully we can look at some, I don't know if they'll fund underpasses, but they may help us fund the river park. Trying to be creative here.
Yeah, George.
So when I came before you for the first reading of this kayak park, I gave a commitment based on the BLCC that we wanted to participate and partner with you in terms of this public process and whatever that takes. And I think that's, and so we're here tonight to discuss how you might want to see that public process go forward, the timing of it. We now have the luxury of some time since we're not going to be doing any in-stream work this coming fall. But as part of that public process, what I would suggest is also take sort of a broader view. So not look specifically just at our RISIT and this in-stream structure, but see how that ties in with your river park plan. Because this, as Patty says, this could just be sort of the entry point, but from here, the potential is for the recreationalists to then go down into really much the center of downtown Basalt. And that's really where I think you'd see the most activity, the most people who want to view, enjoy it, and then they're right in downtown in terms of an economic driver. So I would sort of expand this in terms of looking at a larger picture, knowing that perhaps the RISIT may be the first step of that process. And then you've got funding opportunities, partnerships, you have GOCO grants, and things like that.
Gary?
So, I appreciate the BOCC on this one coming to the table to try to help us, kind of go further than these two features, because, the public process on the two features has not been really, that visible to most of the people who live in Basalt. And, it's a difficult one because we all support it. We love the fact that we can get more water. I mean, I've seen these, I truly believe we can enhance fish habitat. This could be a great recreational resource. It's just trying to make it mesh with our river master plan. I mean, we have a river master plan. I think, talking to Susan, it's time for an update of that river master plan to include, we've completed some things in the river master plan, but to include Pan and Fork, and to include potentially what can be done in other stretches. I mean, Jason can tell you if any place could actually support more features or not, but I do really think that we should work together in that formation of a public process to really kind of figure out the interim plan to kind of work for this, to make sure that this, whatever gets put in, works for the town, works for traffic and everything else. But I think we need to also elevate it to look at the entire stretch through here and really update that river master plan to make it work. And having Picken County partner in a lot of that makes sense, because the county actually, bookends the town with open space lands that protect the river. And so I think it would be great. And then, also bringing Eagle County into that discussion would be huge. So, my suggestion would be that, we start this public process, and two phases of the public process. One would be, what do we do in the interim to help make this a reality and make it work as best as possible? Then take the next step of updating the river master plan to see what else can be done and what else needs to be done for not only flood mitigation or flood risk or anything else, but, what has changed since we've done the last update.
Yeah, and I think we just about need some kind of public process and a little bit of a design before we could tap into the economic development money that you're talking about. If you just think, I mean, if you go to people and ask for money and say, I got kind of an idea.
Yeah, I think we could find out the details through working with Rachel Lenny at Northwest Cog and see what paper, what, plans we have to have on the shelf before
That'd
we
be
move
great.
forward. She's a great resource for that.
Rachel?
Thank you. I agree with everything that's been said. And I guess sometimes we all talk about the same thing, slightly different terms. So I see working towards a larger plan that fits with your master plan and your interests and the connectivity up in the river. And then also looking at it as nodes within that plan that some may advance faster than others. We will have the expiration of the permit on the back of our minds with the Army Corps. And so wanting to do as much as we can, but also not lose that and have to go through that process again. We were lucky to get an extension because of the fish. I don't know that they would do that again. But yeah, I, pardon me, fully realize that it's a lot more than putting the structures in the river to call the water, when the safety issues are about crossing the road and where people will park. And we've dealt with enough problems of our own where people park on the side of the road just because there seems to be a Forest Service amenity on the other side of the road. And go talk to Lenato about parking problems. And so we don't want to create or have parking problems here with you. But I really just can't. The other thing I have said is that I believe we really need to keep an eye on the various grant cycles of GOCO, so that we would be in a position when we did apply before, there was both the uncertainty and maybe unease at the state because they were working on the state water plan about funding additional water parks, and we had not yet received the RISD. And you guys may know through your staff or other avenues that the state water plan should be adopted by the governor after it lands on his desk in December. And that has a component which they call no regrets, low regrets, generated from the Front Range. They get no regrets, we get the low regrets. And that portion is that they really are saying they don't want any more RISDs at all, anything that would inhibit future water development. They don't want any wild and scenic designations, they don't want any more endangered animals, and they don't want any more recreational and channel diversions. So pushing forward with that, when we started it, we just kind of made it before the gate closed. And we also had to actually, sacrifice significantly what we wanted out of that originally. So for most of the ones, or any ones they're doing forward, they're saying, yes, you can have this much flow, but it's subject to another 20,000 acre feet worth of development that will get to come first. Even though you have this date in the priority system, they're making these carve-outs and kind of inventing law. So I think it is really important to hold on to what we got and exercise it. And this spring was a great example. When we had the Grizzly Reservoir, all those fly fishermen took them over to the frying pan. But when we get into the area where all the contract water out of Rudai is called for and they're trying to deliver it in August and September, we're going to see flows too high to fish in there. Now, they say they'll try to keep it down, but at the end of the day, those rights are going to stack, and we're not there yet. But they have been sold to people who will eventually be calling them all at the same time, all when they need them, and that's stacked. Those are comments we made heavily opposing during the 10.825 water and the contract sales with Rudai. But all we've gotten is, well, once we've sold it, and they call it, it's their water, we'll try to help you out. And, no guarantees whatsoever. So it's going to be important during those times that your anglers who've come here can fish the fish the Roaring Fork, and that they won't cancel their vacation because they can't get in the water on the frying pan. It's the two rivers.
We're not going to tell them that they can't get in the water.
Yeah, well, but you're the town of the two rivers, and so taking care of both of them is so important. So that's all I really want to say is I want to take care of the public safety issues in such a way, but know that we want to create a base that each new enhancement is going along a given plan that we all know and we've decided, and we wouldn't open until there's that basic level of safety and the amenities that are necessary to have it be successfully functioning. Right. But as Patty's pointed out, there's grants that way once we get a little further design, and I'm fully committed. We know, or at least I know, I think everyone knows how much you guys have on your plates right now, how many very, very different issues and concerns from Ace Lane all the way up to the land surrounding us, and don't want to throw it all onto you to do, or don't want to supersede your efforts and your involvement, and just have a real partnership.
Are
On
you
that note-
saying, let's get on with it?
Yeah, kind of.
We need to pick this conversation up in about 20 seconds, because we do have food here. We have kids coming in at 6 o'clock. If we're gonna get the food, I think we should take a roundabout, and then we'll go with Rick's question. So, shall we head in there and grab some food and bring it back here so we can keep talking?
Rick, we won't forget you, we promise.
We won't forget you.
Our mouths
Okay.
full, we
That
won't.
was pretty
Hurry,
mind-numbing
by the
so
way.
far, so
Okay.
probably I'll remember it for the next 10 minutes. meantime, since that was adopted in 2002, we've purchased a lot of property, we've developed the riverfront, we've stabilized the banks, we've created parks, we have boat ramps, we have this fly fishing industry, and there's some discussion between fly fishing and kayakers as to exactly who is the economic driver. I mean, you know, fly fishing's a lot more expensive than going boating, I think. But my suggestion would be that we don't go back and revisit the whole thing, but we pick a place now where we're starting from, and we get your open space guys, and we get our open space group, and we sit down and we look at the river corridor, and we inventory what's left to do. Really, from the Midland Bridge up, there's opportunity. From the Midland Bridge down, we've pretty much done the river improvements that were planned to be done. And there are boat ramps, there are rock veins, there are eddies, there are all these things that have been constructed. There's a handicap access, I think, off Midland to get in there with a boat where you can get into the river on the library side. I think those rock veins are designed to give places for people to pull over and keep on going down. Jason's looking at me a little quizzically, like maybe they're not, but they weren't there before. You know, we have the section, and frankly, not that many people kayak. We did a big dredging project for the Midland Bridge years ago that was allowed, you know, kind of got a wave going there for a little while, probably filled in by now. But I think that, you know, taking these master plans and revisiting them and updating them and all that stuff takes more time than it should, given that we've already done, we've got land exchanges over on the Stubby side where we accommodated the belt width of the river and reconfigured lots in that subdivision. You know, we don't need to go back to square one and do that. And I think that the place it should start with a facilitated conversation would be with Pickens County Open Space and Post here in Basalt, our parks, open space and trails guys. And let them, you know, look at it and bring in a couple of people that are experts, either facilitators or river people like Jason, and see what we can come up with. Because we're very limited now, I think, because we've done so many improvements and we have land that is still in private ownership. The biggest piece of this that I think should be looked at is the Roaring Fork Mobile Home Park. It's still in Pickens County. And I think part of it is an Eagle. But that, if you looked at the map, and you know, it's right there, just below above the Midland, where are there, yeah. It's across the river there, right, Denise? That's Ritchie right there. So where's, anyway, that's an area that is gonna have a significant undevelopable area, you know, whatever time frame it takes to happen. And those mobile homes be relocated, much like it was over here at the Pan Fork. It's almost a mirror image of what goes on the other side of the river over there. And that's in your county. That's not part of Basalt. And, you know, that could be annexed. It could be joint partnership effort between us, but that's the next area that's gonna see a lot of river improvements. That dike will have to go. As far as I know, it's not FEMA approved. So, you know, that's what I would suggest we do. Keep it out of our hands for a while, because we are busy. I'll let these volunteers, you know, spend some time looking at it.
Okay, I think we need to close the conversation on that one unless someone has a burning desire.
I just have a quick,
Yeah.
I think we should also add in there the Healthy Rivers and Streams folks.
Sure.
Bring them into that pool of volunteers, because they've taken a great interest in this, and I think that's important. Thanks, Jackie.
And before we launch into, yes, sir.
Yeah, Rick, you said open space and trails, but I think it's actually been our Healthy Rivers and Streams Board that's been working on this project, not the open space and trails.
No, but I think there needs to be some conversation between our.
They could both for
Yeah.
sure. Because
We're
they, pointing to Gary, that whole staff is really good at, you know, thinking big and looking at the big picture and
Well,
trying
and I
to
think
solve problems.
That's why I'm bringing it up, because this would be a good starting point, because we have development on the south side that could occur that's adjacent to the Rio Grande Trail, that trail connections, all those things with the Rafta corridor plan. You know, we need to have your voice in there. You own 28 acres on the other side of that right of way with us, where the community gardens are. They've mentioned they want to have maintenance facilities, snowcat vehicle storage and things like that over there. So there is an opportunity here to create that comprehensive plan. I'd like
George,
to
did
see
you
it
have
go
one?
forward.
Well, just to finish up, it sounds like, why don't we have our guys talk to your guys, and let's set up a public process, forum.
Could you have your people call our people? Is that how it goes? Thanks, guys. Before we launch into affordable housing and daycare for 10 minutes, I mistakenly did not give John Peacock the floor at the beginning of this meeting, and now I'm behind.
Well,
The
I can
A's.
wait till the beginning of the next meeting and do
Is it, it has to be at the beginning of a meeting?
it. It does not have to be at the beginning
Oh,
of the
I'm
meeting.
sorry, John.
No, that's okay. And I actually just assumed we were gonna go at 6 o'clock after you called the, literally the next meeting to order. I have a fun task, a little bit of a celebration for Basalt. And I'm sitting both as the Pickens County manager, but as a representative of the International City Managers Association. And I do not know if the council is aware, but I'm quite sure the public is not, that at their last international conference held in September, Basalt was recognized with a Program Excellence Award for community sustainability. And these are not given out lightly. There are very few communities internationally that win these. This award is in recognition of Basalt's implementation of a microturbine project. And the program really originated in 2009 with a discussion with Basalt's Green Team, which is not just internal candidates. I understand it involves community members. It expanded to include Holy Cross, to include Basalt's water utilities, and really a unique partnership formed that resulted in the microturbine project going online. And since it's gone online, the plant has produced roughly 150,000 kilowatts annually, which is enough electricity to power 15 to 20 homes and reduce the carbon footprint or emissions by nearly 250,000 pounds a year. But what was really recognized for this project is it really hit on the 3 Ps of sustainability. It hit on planet, of course, as I just said, reducing your carbon footprint, but it really also took into account people and prosperity by developing the leadership capacity among various groups to solve what is an international problem at a local level. So, Ms. Mayor, if I may come up, I will present you with this program. Madam Mayor. I'm
Where'd
really
you
grateful
find
you
him?
didn't have to
I love
point
it.
it out.
I love it.
I'll present you and the town council with this Program Excellence Award from ICMA.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Madam Mayor, congratulations.
Can I call you Mr. Manager? No, this is a big surprise to me. I don't think is anybody aware that we were up for
Is
this?
this on the frying pan right up here?
It's not on the frying pan, it's on
Water treatment plant.
See the water treatment.
Lexington.
Yeah, it's off of the spring water that feeds
As it drops down
your plant. You have a good amount of head that drops about 500 feet from the origination down. But really, this is a recognition of your leadership as a council and a recognition of your staff's work in putting this together. So
Excellent.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay for us. Yes, sir.
A little historical perspective. There used to be, the Luxingers had a little hydroelectric plant on the spring water coming down into Lake Christine, and they would charge people's batteries for them, because the people in Basalt, that was the first electricity they had, was like charging batteries, and then they could run, I don't know what they would run, their
laptop.
yeah, their laptops, they would charge their electric cars and all that kind of stuff. So this is using that same water, but higher up on the hill to generate electricity.
That Basalt Springs pipeline was made out of printing those printer lead sheets off the Aspen tintype, Aspen Times tintype.
Oh, really?
Well,
3 foot long, rolled up, bolted together, and
Yeah,
down the
good
hill.
That's the can-do
Good water.
attitude.
Well, if there are 5 minutes of affordable housing and daycare that Mike wants to toss out there for us to chew on, I mean,
I think you talked about it. I mean, honestly, the talk of trying to make sure that, you know, the transportation and well, you were talking about, the daycare that's over on South Side, there's potentially more daycare included in the South Side development areas, and, you know, the affordable housing over there, that all comes together. And one of the things that we talked about back when we had the joint meeting with Eagle County was to start potentially looking at Healthy Communities Fund and finding ways the Mid-Valley can do what, you know, the city of Aspen has been able to do, is to find ways to fund affordable housing and daycare, not just through trying to exact from developers or, you know, dealing with, if you saw the general fund budget or anything like that, but trying to find a funding mechanism to make this happen. Kids First happened, affordable housing in Aspen happens, and it happens through tax dollars, so.
Patty.
Funding mechanism, big effort coming up in the next couple of years, short-term couple of years, to reform Tabor. And one of the things I've been trying to throw in there is to bring back the voters' right to vote on a real estate transfer tax. It makes sense, it works for the city. That was one thing that Tabor took away the right of voters to do under their taxpayer bill of rights. And that's something I'm trying to throw in the mix with the organizations that are looking at reforming Tabor.
That would be great.
Just a thought.
I know.
So, yeah, so we'll just be looking for support on, you know, that measure, so how big it becomes and where the boundary looks at it. Obviously, we're gonna have to work with you
Yep.
guys.
Well, we'll keep you in that loop.
Rick?
On an implementation note, a group of guys got together and have facilitated Miss Mayor's sewer line. So in about another week or two, she'll be able to put another 18 kids in that
I
daycare.
know, it's so cool.
Town of Basalt issued the right-of-way permits. Susan Pearson up at Pickens County reviewed, but she's still kind of asking questions about revegetation, you know, stormwater, which is all taken care of, but.
Well, to be fully disclosed, my daughter is the lead teacher at Miss Mayor's Hobby
Right.
Farm. And
And
it
it's a
is an
great spot.
amazing preschool. It's
an
amazing.
preschool. So Gould, us, Adam Roy, Roaring Fork Engineering, Kelly Gessley at the plant, our Boyd here at Public Works, Susan,
Yay.
her
thank you.
husband who's out there raking topsoil. You know, it'd be great.
It's
So
great.
if we can, even on a small scale, accomplish those kinds of things, the funding will come, but if we can continue to work
Yeah.
like that together, we'll get some stuff built.
Amazing little
We need
program.
to
And Patty, I hear
elevate that and
I hear
get
that a little more childcare is
Well, we're
gonna
on
be
a
in order.
mission to do it, not.
There's more childcare in order coming from
To
the
be
Clapper
needed.
household.
Yes, congratulations.
So we gotta get those babies out there in daycare.
Well, I want press on that, because, I mean, honestly, you know, it's one of those things where it's such an issue, and if you talk to the daycare providers in this area, they're gonna fill those spots like that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, you know, that is such an issue, and what Rick is dealing with on the, you know, trying to, with the business community and everything else, this is an issue that needs to be in the papers more often.
I'm surprised it isn't already.
Miss Mayor had a waiting list without doing any marketing or anything.
Steve,
One of the things that was going to be at the CCRC was the daycare center.
right.
Is that still a requirement for when a development happens there?
It's is it the same application, basically? Okay.
This was the Stotts Mill. The CCRC was different. The Stotts Mill had a daycare facility in it. And so, you know, we'll see. That was, because I was on council when we approved that, and that was a critical component. If you're having all this affordable housing being put there, you need
Yeah, it'd be great if Eagle County would throw that into some of their upcoming development applications.
Right.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we are going to have to call our meeting to order in about 20 seconds here, but in the meantime, can you guys stay and help us give awards to the kids? I think you've done this before.
We've stayed and clapped. I think you guys should give the awards.
Hey, what the hell?
No,
Guest
you guys-
guest
you guys
giving
have
is
given.
fine with me. We don't own this. We don't own these kids.
I'm a child, I'll give awards.
Okay, so I guess we need Pam in order to,
She's right behind me.
oh, okay. Eek, Pam is gone, help.
No, I haven't ordered.
These kids are here. I'm waiting on Kayla and Adria.
Okay,
Should I have them come all come in?
yes, have them come in.
Get my garbage out of the way.
They come in that, down there. Chair, if there is one. Okay, while we wait for her to come, can we go ahead and,
Can I just say something?
well, except for I was waiting for Rachel and those guys to come back in.
Who'd you get? Jane Smith?
George, can you get Rachel? Come here, Rachel. Here, have a thingy. Please.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Here, thank you. Okay, we are going to skip over our normal preliminary items and go directly to our awards for the kids. I just want to say a thank you to Grassroots for broadcasting our meetings live and for rebroadcasting. You can go to www.grassrootstv.org, search for Basalt, and you'll find us. And also a reminder that tomorrow is Coffee with the Mayor. That's me, and it will be at Saxy's tomorrow at 8 a.m., and that's downtown Basalt. So, we have had guests here in a meeting with us tonight, the Pitkin County Commissioners, and for the younger ones who may not know who that is, Pitkin County has Aspen in it. Do you know where Pitkin County is? Who knows where Pitkin County is? All right. Anyway, the biggest honor that we ever get up here is to give out awards to the Citizens of the Month, and we have bestowed that honor on some of our county commissioners to help us along the way. So I'm going to ask Bernie to maybe do the first award presentation. Oh, yeah, let me run this by really quick. The award this month is based on the 6 pillars of character, and this month in October, it's trustworthiness. Thank you for this reminder. And that involves being honest, don't deceit, cheat, or steal, be reliable, do what you say you're gonna do, have the courage to do the right thing. That's a hard one, right? Build a good reputation, be loyal, stand by your family and friends, right? So, here goes with the awards.
Is Will Rivera here? Could you come down front, please?
We opened a
Yeah.
little hole for you to come in.
Okay. Will Rivera possesses an intrinsic sense of honesty and trustworthiness. He loves life and learning and is willing to engage in all activities necessary to pursue learning and helping others. Peter Mueller, Principal.
Yay.
Well,
That's a lot of trouble. Okay, who has the next one?
Oh, me?
Okay.
Great. Well, this is really special. We thought we were just coming for a meeting on boring things instead of getting to honor these great community members. Will Tyler Meehan come forward?
Yay, Tyler.
This certificate of achievement is being granted with the following description. Tyler Meehan is a wonderful example of trustworthiness. He is always honest with his actions and is trusted by his teachers and his peers. He is reliable, and his teacher is always able to trust him with tasks to make sure they get done. He stands up for his friends and peers when needed, and has a strong reputation among the staff members of the Basalt Elementary School of having strong character and being a great role model for the younger students. Tyler can always be seen doing the right thing.
Woo!
Congratulations.
Good job, Tyler. Who's got another one? George.
Let's see, and the winner is Jennifer Vasquez Pineda.
Jennifer.
So this certificate of achievement certifies that Jennifer Vasquez Pineda is awarded this certificate of achievement for trustworthiness, Basalt Student Citizen of the Month. And because honesty, integrity, trustworthiness, Jennifer Vasquez Pineda, Jennifer was recently taking a quiz and ended up with a quiz key by mistake. But she immediately brought it to me, not me, Peter Mueller, to show me that it wasn't right. Signed, Peter Mueller, the principal.
Good job.
Good job.
I have the certificate for Kayla Rodriguez.
Oh, bummer.
Not here? We'll save it for.
Adria Jankala? Now, I have to say a little something first. I used to take a lot of the Jankala kids on my school bus when I was school bus driving. So,
There's a lot of them.
I know there's a lot,
Yeah,
so
but
it
were
must
they
have
all
been your brothers and
trustworthy?
sisters. Adria Jankala, trustworthiness is an excellent attribute for a person to have. A student that can be trusted will have the ability to succeed in many avenues in life. Adria Jankala is an extremely trustworthy person. Her teachers can trust her to do a myriad on tasks no matter how big or small. Adria is honest, reliable, and has the courage to stand up for what is right, even in the face of adversity. Congratulations.
certify that I am trustworthy in name pronunciation. Ubaldo Boguerin Guerrero? Ubaldo is a student that displays trustworthiness every day. He is kind and sensitive to people's ideas and feelings and never breaks that trust. He makes his friends and peers feel safe sharing their work and asking questions in class. This is a certificate of achievement that certifies that my friend Ubaldo, who's now my good friend, is awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Trustworthiness Basalt Student Citizen of the Month. Is that all we have? Did we do? Okay, just so everybody knows, there's a photo opportunity in the hallway, and the people who won these awards also get swim passes for the summer.
You guys see the Colorado Teacher of the Year up at the high school. Tell her thank you from us for doing such a great job.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Pretty
that's really
cool.
cool, too.
So if you want to go in the hall, there's a photog plan out there.
Thank you. And the grandson. Today, guys, that was not easy.
Ahead, even though we're having people wander for a minute. The next item is the consent agenda, and it's the minutes and the students of the month. Do we have a motion?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Gary said aye. We're gonna say Gary said aye. Okay, the next one is council comments, reports, and disclosures. And I will just jump in here really quick to follow up with what Rick started with. Letitia Ingram has been selected as the Colorado Teacher of the Year, and now I'm gonna ball again for sure, our Basalt High School teacher. And if you see her on the street, as Rick said, or I posted on Facebook all day congratulating her, and she probably thinks I'm stalking her at this point, but she is quite the hero, and I can't believe that Basalt has the teacher of the, Colorado Teacher of the Year. That's awesome.
Colorado, the whole state.
Of the whole state.
Wow.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
It's a big,
Right, you know what, we will try to
Yes,
get her.
Yes. Well,
Along those lines, as we are honoring our outstanding students, everyone be aware that November 7th is the Taste of Basalt, put on by the Basalt Education Foundation. It's the primary fundraiser for the Education Foundation at the Roaring Fork Club. Again, November 7th from 6 to 11, and it will sell out, so buy your tickets early online.
sure you did.
Saturday the 7th. The second thing, Jackie, for you guys, I'm on the core board. We currently give them $5,000 a year from Basalt, which is half of what Snowmass gives and a third of what Glenwood Springs gives. They would like us to increase our contribution. They can be really helpful with the library, with some energy saving things. As we do our downtown energy inventory, they can be very helpful. So I'm hoping that we'll consider upping our support of CORE.
Sounds like a budget chat, for sure. Thanks, Rob.
Do they take our rent fees now?
No, that's actually, when we talk about our sustainability regulations, it's something that we'll have to discuss.
It might make sense for them to oversee that program.
Yes. Gary?
I will say it again, until November, until, when is election day? But
3rd, I think.
it's November 3rd, but, you know, everyone should have their ballot now, and on your ballot, there is an initiative called 3B, and it's a bond for the schools. And with all the kids in this room, in the future of our community, I hope everyone can really think hard about voting for this. It is a bond, it's gonna increase your taxes, but it's going to what is probably the biggest generator of great communities is good schools. So I really hope that people will vote for 3B. There's a ton of information on the website. It's bondtogether.org. And, you know, I think there's a lot of people going around talking to people. And so, you know, it's getting close. And I won't have another chance to say this, so everyone's happy. But the reality is it's a time for us to bond together as a community of Basalt and Carbondale and Glenwood to really come together and fund our public schools. So hopefully everyone gets their ballots. Hopefully you all voted already. Just tell me you did. And, you know, we get together and you get your neighbors to vote. So thank you.
And just to follow up real quickly on that, yeah, we want you to vote yes on that. For those who think this is just a touchy-feely issue about kids and education, it is totally not about kids and education, totally. It's really about our businesses and our ability to stay economically viable, because when anybody comes into a community, I know this, when you start moving into a different community for a job or whatever, the first thing you're gonna ask is, what is the conditions, how are the schools rated? And if you do not have highly rated schools, you do not come here if you have kids. So I think that is one thing that has not been really emphasized enough, is this is not just about kids and education. This is about the viability of our economics in this community. So if you have friends who haven't voted yet and are on the line saying this is a lot of money or there's a lot of things in this question, remind them that the businesses are really supportive of this. So anyway, we won't get to do this to you again. Done. Yes.
I'd just like to read from an email I just got from the Early Child Care Coalition and the Basalt Bell group, especially concerning the development that could happen in the Mid-Valley. It says here that the Eagle County Roaring Fork Valley area already has a critical shortfall of quality early education facilities. In fact, some analysis indicates that this region has the greatest child care supply-demand imbalance of our entire Parachute to Aspen region. As one example, the Blue Lake Preschool adjacent to Elgibel currently serves approximately 150 children and has 179 families on its waiting list. We just completed a study that showed about 104 children on waiting lists in the valley that are of the lowest economic scale, and looked at a pro forma to construct an 8,000 square foot child care center or a 10,000 square foot child center using public-private kind of partnerships. And we think we can get it done for about $300 a square foot. So that's in works. You know, the local community will shoulder most of the load of these human, education, governmental, environmental costs and impacts, which Jackie's talking about. Numerous studies have confirmed the link between quality education and success in school, employment, and other opportunities. So this is real. This is now being backed up by real data, by real numbers, by real statistics. And, you know, it is definitely one of the more critical, in fact, the word crisis was used at our last roundtable. So, you know, I think that Basalt is being recognized now as one of the leaders in the valley to try to get some of this stuff implemented, which, you know, I think is an awfully good thing. And I think we have more opportunities to do it here in Eagle County and Picking County than there are elsewhere. So I just want to echo what Jackie said, but there's a tremendous force behind this right now. And I think you'll see the conditions improve and we'll get more and more daycare established. But it takes action, not words.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay. Our next item is an engineer's report from SGM, Louis Meyer, and I know he's here. How are you, Louis?
Good evening.
Thanks for coming. Good report.
Well, I should thank Pam for that, for making sure I was on time this month with getting the report.
She hammers me all the time too, so.
Good evening, and I'll be very brief because I think the detail was in your packet, but there's a few things I'd like to bring up. One relative to the floodplain issue, and not to be repetitive, but we did have a conference call with CDOT and Town of Basalt staff and myself and their contractor, and we're within a few days of having the letter of map revision submitted to the CWCB and FEMA. And the reason that I think it's important to keep this in front of you is it has fairly large land use and legal implications, because the floodway will be eliminated to a significant swath of land on the south side and will open that land up to different land use opportunities. We would like to talk to town staff about being out in front of that, and I think there's some things we can do with the flood damage prevention ordinance that you have to make sure that it's current, it's up to date, and it addresses the specific issues of the town of Basalt. But that's kind of an update on where that stands.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Did you have more to
No.
say? Okay. I got my eyebrows raised on this. The Roaring Fork Rivers is being proposed by the CDPHE as listed on the Clean Water Act Section 303D list as an impaired stream because of temperatures.
Yes.
I really don't, can you talk about that just a little bit? Why that happens and what can be done about it?
Well, the reason I put that in the packet was because it's a very underreported issue and not many people know about it. Under the Clean Water Act, the EPA, which is administered by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, has a section called the 303D, Section 303D, and they're required to list rivers and tributaries that don't meet current standards for many, many items. And it's really, there's only, in the Roaring Fork Valley, there's only been one tributary, Cattle Creek, that's been on the list recently. So listing the Roaring Fork River as impaired is a fairly large issue. It was listed because of temperature, and it's probably, temperature is rising for a variety of reasons, trans-mountain diversions, below where there's holes in the river where the flows are low. There were 3 exceedances in 5 years, and unless there is a lot of opposition from advocacy groups, it will be on the list for the next cycle. And it has big implications to people like point source dischargers, wastewater treatment plants. It will potentially impact municipalities with point source stormwater discharges, and it has fairly large implications. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, Tom.
Where have they measured these elevated thermal conditions?
We don't know. We're trying to find that out.
So it's not necessarily the entire river, it's just somewhere in the river.
The river is listed from the confluence with the Colorado up to Hunter Creek.
Right, but but I mean, where the
Yes.
monitoring has shown exceedances, it's in a particular location, I assume.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Probably likely downstream?
Well, it could.
Downstream of Basalt, I mean?
It could be we call it the hole in the river between the confluence with the Frying Pan and the large ditch diversions upstream. That's considered one of the holes in the river.
Could you just bring us back a little bit more information on this next time? Just, I mean.
Yes.
Where is it? What can we do about it? What do we, just all that. This one concerned me, for sure.
It's not related to a point source discharge, is it?
No. No, but what it will do is when you have a point source discharge, the next time you file for a discharge permit, you will have to show if you're a wastewater plant, what do you do with your wastewater? So,
I mean, basically, Jackie, if it's natural conditions, anything you can do about it.
Right.
But it will impact those who are, as Lewis said, discharging effluent into the river.
I just want to talk about it again separately.
Okay.
Yeah, Rick?
On the south side floodplain, floodway changes, we had envisioned that Midland Avenue underpass as being an area for flood relief, for water to come across underneath the highway and get back into the channel. That's why the library has a big hole in front of it. Does this change that at all, or is there still that impediment that the highway creates from returning whatever floodwater is still gonna be there back to the channel? Because that was a big part of the reason we were gonna construct that, as well as connecting both sides of town.
It's my understanding the letter of map revision which will be submitted reduces the blockage at the bridge from 40% to 10%. So the 10% flow from a 100-year event will continue down the south side, but it drastically removes the amount of land in the floodway. It doesn't change the floodplain that much, but it does change the land in the floodway, which is considered channels of the river.
So could you come back and tell us what that does in a 100-year flood if it goes from 40% to 10? Okay.
And actually, just maybe a little bit more about what construction was done or what they did to it?
Yes, I'd be glad to bring back information on that.
I like pictures.
Okay.
Is that all they did?
I have some good pictures.
Okay, thanks so much, Louis.
Just one last thing on the
Okay.
Basalt Underpass. We've been working with our design sub-consultants, particularly DHM, to work through the value engineering items to see what we can value engineer out. Unfortunately, as Rick knows, and I'm sure Mark and Gary, the construction community is still extremely busy. This is probably their busiest time of year, so we have some time, I think, later in the winter to really consider putting that back out to bid. So
Thanks a lot.
that's all I had.
Thanks, Louis.
Have a good night, Louis. Okay, next item, citizens' comments for items that are not on the agenda. Are there citizens who have comments? Yes, ma'am. If you just come up to the microphone and state your name.
I'm Jenna Moe. I'm the new director of the Wiley Art Center, and I just want to say thank you. Thanks to the council and to your town for your support of the arts and of the Wiley.
Oh, thanks, Jen.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to see you. You waited a long time to say that.
I've only been here a month, so yeah.
No, I mean, you've been in that chair about a month.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much, and you'll see more of us. And
We'll come say hi to you.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other citizens who have comments for items that are not on the agenda? All right. Okay, we have second reading of ordinances. The first one is a continued public hearing and second reading of ordinance 19, series of 2015, an ordinance of the town, approving amendments to portions of chapter 16 zoning and chapter 17 subdivision of the municipal code of Basalt, previously referred to as affordable housing requirements, and amending the town's fee schedule concerning community housing. Mr. Scanlon.
So if you go to the second page, right after the action item summary, there are 6 points related to these particular ordinances and why they're important. I think they address a lot of the concerns that we've heard, and sometimes we don't realize these things are buried in there. And I know that Kathy, with Basalt Affordable Community Housing, is here to talk about it as well. They reviewed it, the P&Z reviewed it. If you look at those 6 items that are listed on the second page, I think it hits most of the concerns that we've heard from the council, either in someone visiting me and talking to me about it as it relates to waiving development review fees, building permit fees, water tank surcharges, creating carrots, not necessarily just sticks. And then the idea that as we looked at the sale prices for units, that this allowed them to go down. And then it would allow us to then explore other ways that we could incentivize affordable housing, understanding that this by itself doesn't do it. That there's a lot more required in order to do that. And as I said Friday, this is really something we, staff, P and Z and Bach, really want you to approve because we think it will help us as we take on affordable housing. So Kathy, you want to talk?
Before Kathy goes, I was just gonna say, I, for one, so appreciate getting the words down to something that we can all understand. I don't know if this was magic or how this happened, but it was very difficult to wade through the actual ordinance itself, the strike-throughs, and just the complexity of it. And I think we all need to read those ordinances, but it's really nice if you kind of know what you're looking for when you read them. So if we could encourage this type of representation in future packet items, that would be much appreciated by me and I'm sure the public. Kathy?
I don't really have anything to add. I think that, one of the big reasons that Bach supports this is the parity issue. And jurisdictional shopping for residential developments is happening all over unincorporated Eagle County. Really? I have a loud voice. So that's really where Bach is coming from. We recognize that we are lowering requirements, but we feel that in lowering those requirements, we are encouraging development to happen in the town and in the urban growth boundary, which is where we want it. So if you have any questions.
Thanks, Kathy.
Try to answer them.
Council, questions?
Thanks for hanging in there for 10 years.
You're welcome.
Okay. I think this is a public hearing, right?
Yes.
Okay, so before we go to council, I will open the public hearing at 6:32-ish and see if there's anyone out there that has questions or comments on the affordable housing changes, recommended changes. Seriously? Okay. Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Council?
Your Honor, I move the approval of ordinance 19, series of 2015 on second reading.
I second it.
Okay. Any discussion?
This is 6A and B?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
6A.
6A.
And
Just-
just A?
Yeah, why don't we read just the,
You don't have to read
let's
it
do
all.
6A.
Just 6A?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then we just do 6.
Okay. If there are no other comments, I would just like to say that it was really helpful to me, once again, to see this broken down so simplistically. I would be crazy not to say I love the price reduction being really brought to the forefront, because it was something that didn't really stand out in the language that much. I know it was there and we talked about it. But when I know that the people who worked on this believe that parity is important, and that reducing our percentages down to Eagle County requirements is maybe the way to get at avoiding big projects like ACEs. Number one on that, I don't believe you can stop jurisdictional shopping because you own land where you own land, and there are also parcels farther down valley in Garfield County that are nowhere near a town. It's where the land is owned, and that's where the development is gonna happen. And I feel like there was slim or no chance of getting Ace Lane to ask to be included in the town. I don't know that for sure, but just from conversations with him, I feel that's the truth. And I also feel like it is really sort of insincere to go to county meetings and say, you don't have nearly enough affordable housing in your land use application, and then turn around and try to make our regulations the same as ours. And we just got through saying, you're not asking for enough percentage of affordable housing. So I don't feel like there's will on this council to change that direction. The wind is blowing that way to reduce ours down to Eagle County's, but because of that, I will not be able to support this. So I just want to explain why. So, any other discussion?
Can I ask where we are with the RETA?
We took the commercial RETA out, based on the discussion that we had at the last meeting. It seemed pretty universal that it really wasn't gonna help us. So we left.
Is that the Friday meeting or the last council meeting?
Oh, at the last council meeting. Right.
I thought we were gonna discuss it, and is it still something that
It's second reading, discuss.
we can talk about and add later?
Yep.
We can talk about it later. It just seemed pretty obvious that we weren't really raising enough money, that it was accomplishing anything towards affordable housing. So we thought
At
that's.
the last meeting, those were the numbers I wanted to see, what it was gonna actually do. But I guess instead we just pulled it off.
Do you want to table this or try to table it to get information?
I think that we need to examine everything that we're doing, and if we're serious about this, as I wrote, we should really be creative and come up with a
Is there a possibility
widespread
that
approach.
staff can just, I know you looked at it and give us an idea of what those numbers were, the possibility of what you could raise with Rita, just,
So if you go to page 3, it
of
talks
our
about,
hymnals, page 3 of our hymnals?
page 3 of that item, you'll see all the things that we're gonna look at in terms of
I don't see any pages.
possible incentives that don't require code amendments.
Oh.
And then if there are things that we want to bring back and get further information on, but understanding that this represents very few, it impacts very few affordable housing units.
That's
I
what it
think
said.
our concept was, is that if we wanted to revisit the RETA for commercial in the future, we could do that, but it was pretty obvious that it wasn't enough to, really make an appreciable dent, so we wanted to move forward with this stuff.
Anybody else? Rick?
I think to Kathy's point, the areas that are developable for any kind of residential on the south side are all still outside of town. I believe Stotts, the Ski-Co, Picking County Partnership, our piece that we have adjacent to Clam-Paul. Clam-Paul's 7 acres. And annexation's a different animal, always has been. I don't know how we'll treat that in the future when we have an applicant come in and say, well, you know, we have an ordinance that says 15%, but since you want to get annexed, you know, there's an opportunity to negotiate for more. So I feel like we have a tool that's probably appropriate for areas that are already in town. Willits is under a different affordable housing guideline as I get it. And so we've got opportunity out on the south side to kind of set the tone for perhaps, you know, a project that has 80% affordable housing and 20% free market that has a little public participation involved in it. So I think this gives us a little leeway and helps us at least have conversations with people.
Okay, anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you vote?
Not yet.
Okay, okay, nay.
No motion? Second?
One,
Yes, there was a motion and a second.
4-3.
Do we want to try this again?
All in favor?
All those in favor?
You do a roll call.
On favor?
Okay.
Complicated.
Opposed? Got it. Are we good? Thanks, guys. Okay, the next one, okay,
Madam Mayor, I move that the council approve ordinance number 20, series of 215 on the second reading.
Did we, just to clarify, did we open the public hearing on both of them?
we did open, well, we opened the
Yeah.
public hearing, we only opened it on the first one, so.
Yeah, let me read the title for the record, just to be clear, and then we can open up the public hearing and have a vote. Continued public hearing and second reading of ordinance 20, series of 2015, an ordinance of the town council of the town of Basalt, Colorado, adopting amendments to the Basalt Community Housing Guidelines.
Okay, so this is related to the first item, it's basically part and parcel, but we will still open the public hearing on this and see if there are any comments or questions regarding it. Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Okay. Mayor, I move that the town council approve ordinance number 20, series of 215 on second reading.
Second.
Okay, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Okay, we're consistent. Have to give us that. Okay, the next items are resolutions. First one is Resolution 51, a resolution of the town. Thanks, Kathy.
You're welcome.
A resolution of the town extending the deadline for submittal of an amended sketch plan application and approving an amended pre-development agreement regarding the Albany Kittle addition to the Roaring Fork Club.
Ms. Mayor, I need
Yes. Counselor Kittle is recusing himself.
It has, I have also in the past done that, so.
Did you say you are too?
Yep.
Okay, and so is Counselor Stevens. Bye, guys. You are dismissed if you want to run away home. If you want to go home, you can. Okay. All right, James.
Okay, thank you. This is consideration of a resolution that would approve of an amendment to the pre-development agreement for the Albany Kittle addition to the Roaring Fork Club, and to extend the deadline by which the applicants are required to submit an amended sketch plan application for the Albany Kittle addition. As background, the Roaring Fork Club received a sketch plan approval in 2012. It included an addition of 13 new club cabins, 16 affordable housing units, and 3 single-family lots, as well as moving and expanding the maintenance facility that they have. In November of 2014, the town and the Roaring Fork Club entered into a pre-development agreement on the Albany Kittle addition for a annexation proposal that proposed to annex a portion of the Meyer Ranch property, which was adjacent to the Albany Kittle addition. Let me show you this just quickly. This property here, shown in black, is the Albany Kittle addition property. The prior proposal in 2014 that the town and the Roaring Fork Club entered into the pre-development agreement on included this portion that's outside the current boundaries of the town. The new proposal that the club has been working with the Timbers Resorts on is similar to the 2012 approvals that they received for sketch plan. It includes 7 cabins in the first phase, as well as an addition of several affordable housing buildings in the current affordable housing complex that they have in the Albany Kittle property. And then they're proposing also 3 Kittle single-family lots on the east end of the property. So this evening we have a pre-development agreement that's been amended, and what it does is it includes the Timbers Resorts on behalf of the Roaring Fork Club as the developer of record. It also amends the prior agreement to take out the references to the annexation proposal that they were thinking about in 2014. And then the proposed reso also extends the deadline by which they have to submit an amended sketch plan application, and it would take it out to January 10th. We do have several members. We've got Greg DeRosa of the Roaring Fork Club, and then we also have members of the Timbers Resorts here this evening. So staff would suggest taking any comments that they may have, taking public comments, and then providing council discussion, and ultimately staff would recommend approving the resolution.
For sure.
So they wanted to be annexed, and now they don't want to be annexed? Is that the deal?
Yeah, in 2014, they had a concept of annexing a portion of the neighboring Meyer Ranch property to do an expansion of their maintenance facility.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so they've worked on a program further and decided that they don't need to do that. They would prefer to stay within the property that is already annexed.
And so the maintenance facility is now as it was before,
Well,
in the original,
it's different, but they're still proposing to stay within the property.
within the boundary.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Greg, do you have any comments?
Yeah,
Additional
hi,
comments?
I'm Greg DeRosa. I'm the new club manager at the Roaring Fork Club. I just wanted to introduce myself. Obviously, sorry. Just wanted to.
We're just learning this mic thing.
Just wanted to introduce myself and also let you know that obviously the financial turn of 09 to 12 set the club back quite a bit, and our partnership now and working with the Timbers Group has given us a whole lot of hope for the potential final evolution of what was, I think, originally intended, and I think this is kind of a natural evolution of what's on the property right now. And we just need a little more time to get the details in this plan so we can present them to you for approval.
Anything else from the applicant, or whatever we're calling this, I guess?
I'll introduce myself as well. I'm Jerry Burton with Timbers Resorts.
Hi, Jerry.
Hi. I just want to thank you all for the consideration. We're relatively new to this process. And what we're basically asking for on additional time is to nail down some engineering numbers, work with the neighbors, the Kettle family, and bring it all to fruition. We believe the preliminary map that you have is a good outline and it is a doable program, but we need to put a few more numbers to it to make it viable for the club and for us to proceed. So we just need some more time to investigate some utility issues, some engineering, et cetera, on the property, and also the agreement with the Kettle family.
I think we're generally pretty tolerant of asking for more time to get it right. We like
Exactly.
that.
I think that's where we're going. We want to make sure that we uncover as many stones as we can
Sure.
and make sure it's viable, which we believe it is. We're pretty excited. We believe this is a little bit more simplistic than what was approved before, and in talking to the board, they feel it's doable.
Is there anybody else from the club that wants to speak, or should we go to the public?
I think public.
Okay, all right. Is there anybody in the public who has questions or comments regarding this resolution? Okay, council?
I
Move that the town council adopt.
Wait a minute. Tie goes to the runner.
I move approval of Resolution 51, Series of 2015.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Thanks for coming in.
Wow, was that
Nice to
tough?
meet you. You have a great wife.
Thanks for coming.
Okay. Next section is ordinances. This is public hearing and first reading of ordinance 21, an ordinance of the town amending Chapter 18 building regulations of the Muni Code of the Town of Basalt regarding sustainable building regulations and amending the town's fee schedule. Mr. Lent.
You have a quick PowerPoint change here to make.
But while we're doing that, why don't we just introduce members, Jeff Dickinson is our consultant. He's actually being funded by CORE. And we have members of our green team. Why don't you each introduce yourself that night?
Yeah.
Charlie?
I'm Charlie Eckert. I'm the building science coordinator with CORE, and I've just recently jumped onto the team with Basalt.
Oh, right. We need you up here.
Everybody who talks
We
has
need
to
you up
come up
here.
or else you don't get.
You know what we need? Let me have a quick, can we have a digression? Could we get one of those cordless mics that's hooked up that we can pass to people?
We'll look into it. We need some kind of clip or something.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
Charlie.
Charlie Eckert. I'm the building science coordinator with CORE, and I've just recently replaced Jason Haber, who moved to California from the Green Team. So I've been helping out on the Green Team subcommittee with sustainable building guidelines.
When did Jason move?
About a month ago.
6 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, very recently.
All right.
And we also have Philip Ring, who's coming up to.
Hi.
And we have Amanda Poindexter, who has been participating in the Green Team and has been participating in the subcommittee for the Green Team as part of the regulations that you're going to be looking at shortly.
Thanks for coming, Amanda, everybody.
Come wave into
Okay.
the mic.
She's just waving at the mic. Okay. Oh, okay.
Who's the white-haired guy?
And,
Mr. Wilson.
And everybody knows
Mr.
Jim
Wilson.
our building official.
Dennis is dead. Oh, Dennis is muted. Oh, Dennis is.
I always forget there's a street behind me.
It's Dennis's last name.
I know.
Menace. Menace.
I think I was just looking at.
Wilson's the next door neighbor.
Oh, I just thought you were staring into space back there. Are we ready?
Yes, this is a public hearing and first reading of an ordinance that would approve of an addition of sustainable building regulations for non-residential and multifamily development. As background, in 2009, the town adopted sustainable building regulations for single-family duplex and some detached townhome development. It was identified by the Green Team and staff that there was kind of a need and a gap there for multifamily development and non-residential development, as our 2009 regulations didn't apply to those types. So a subcommittee of the Green Team got together and worked on a program. Originally, we were going to look at going to the International Green Construction Code, but it was determined that that would be a difficult code to administer, given that we've got kind of a one-man building department staff here. And we kind of checked in with some other jurisdictions that went with, it's called the IGCC. And they felt it was, a bit difficult to administer with a one-man staff. So we looked at then doing something similar to the Eagle County Eco Build program. So the subcommittee worked on converting kind of the Eagle County template of the Eco Build format into something that would apply to Basalt for multifamily and non-residential development. So the committee also noted that the proposed program is similar to the regulations that we have on the single-family and duplex, but kind of amended to fit multifamily and non-residential. So we do have Jim Wilson and Jeff Dickinson here this evening. Jeff is the town's kind of green building consultant, and they worked on the sample scoring. So they would like to kind of go through just generally what's in the program and provide some discussion about why we're looking at doing green building regulations. Jim?
We're going to turn it over to Jeff to start us out, and I'll take it from slide.
Okay.
Yep.
How do we do this?
I'm going to go back here and change slides. So tell everyone to change.
Next slide, please. Great, thanks. I'll just give a little introduction. I was here a couple years ago and gave kind of an intro, so I'm not going to repeat all that. But the kind of the gist of it is, why are we doing this in the first place? What are green codes about, and why is it important? And is there a first slide?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
All right. That was your cue.
Except I can't get any closer.
Oh, boy. Well, we don't really need slides. So. But it's basically the buildings use a significant amount of energy. They account for 40% of the primary energy use in the U.S., 72% of the electric consumption, 39% of carbon emissions, and about 14% of the water. So anything we can do to tighten up those things will not only save money, but save resources as well. So buildings are a big user, second only to transportation in a lot of categories. Where are we getting there? And Basalt signed on to, that's a different one. Signed on to the Mayor's Climate Initiative, so that was really showing the interest in doing these kinds of things. So the Kyoto protocols and that sort of thing. And Basalt's been working toward those things, and this is just another step on the way. And the purpose of these, so that's not the latest presentation. Get there. I mean, the intent of the sustainable building regulations is really to encourage cost-effective, sustainable building methods. So it's fairly simple, and the key word is cost-effective. So we're not trying to make it onerous in any way. We're trying to do cost-effective things that make sense. All right, we're getting closer. No, nope. This is not the right presentation. So maybe go all the way to the top. Maybe it's the upper slides that are there.
You know, sometimes these things just don't work out like you hoped.
Yeah.
You can just keep going and we'll
I'll
just
just,
listen
yeah,
to
I'm
you
just
and
gonna keep
pretend like.
going. I mean, the gist of it too is, just as a reminder, there's green codes and there's energy codes. So the green codes deal with things like building materials and waste and how we use the site and water. The energy codes, like the International Energy Conservation Code.
So what we've got is no different than any other green code. It's got various components around it and through it. And so we got site and water conservation, recycling and reuse. Energy component is what can you give us above and beyond the minimum requirements of the energy code. Renewable energy, indoor air quality, and innovation. Well, it's a point-based program. I don't know if anybody was around, but it's, and we're gonna go through, we'll have the checklist available so you get a sense of what that means. And we set various thresholds for different uses, is the best that we could come up with. And there's a few mandatory fundamental requirements that we've got. Oh, there we go. And then the rest, well, let's talk about the mandatory ones. Construction activity prevention plan, just keeping things clean while you're building an area in the building for recycling, collection, and storage. Pretty minor. Commissioning is one of the big ones. And what that is that once everything is completed, all the construction's done, you have a team come in and confirm that everything is operating as it was designed. And then issues a report that yes, it is, or no, it's not, and we're gonna fix that. And then the other big one was, the requirement was for renewable energy of 2% of the energy budget on site. So that means you're gonna have to provide some solar, pretty much solar, I guess, is all we've got, is what we decided. For 2% of the energy consumption, annual energy consumption. A recurring theme tonight might be how we deal with the construction in this area. It's, the way commercial development is they'll throw up a core, what's called a core and shell. You've got pretty much nothing in it, except hallways, elevators. An example in Willits, underground parking. So that's gonna be your core and shell. And then you come in and plug in tenants. So one of the things we're trying to struggle with is who's gonna be responsible for what during this build-out process, because you have so many different parties involved. Or not so many, but you have various parties involved. And then there's one interim tenant finish that's called a white box. So let's take a visual walk through Willits, and there are areas in the buildings that are just completely empty. And if you go up to the third floor of Block 6, where the Valley View just moved in, they've partitioned off the tenant spaces up there. So those are white box finishes with no tenants. So what we're struggling with is, if somebody wants to move into those white boxes, will this be a burden to them to try and come up with enough points to qualify for the green code? If somebody's coming in and building walls in a completely vacant space, maybe they need to participate a little bit more in the green program.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Okay, so is what you're talking about like the big contractor versus tenant finishes?
Yes.
Okay.
And most areas, well, I can't say most areas don't have this, but most areas have a lot of buildings that come in and are completed, like the hotel, to a turnkey finish where it's ready to move into. what we're seeing here isn't that case at all. So we've got to fit this program to that. One of the ways, initially, that has to do with this renewable energy aspect is, we're gonna look at, rather than 2% of the total energy budget of the building, because we don't know what that's gonna be, we're gonna look at providing 25% of the energy budget for just the core and shell, the common areas. What's it cost to heat it, light it? I think that's about it. And then the other mandatory provision is to provide a chase and space for future solar and radon mitigation. These are all small things, except for the commissioning is a big deal, and the on-site renewable energy is also big. So, next slide, this slide. So again, it's a point-based system, and once you have the mandatory requirements out of the way, then you can just go out and grab a bunch of optionals to reach that certification threshold, which we'll get to. Next slide. We've got a carrot, a stick, and an alternative. If you qualify for the LEED process in any way, which is probably an international green code or a green certification program, you're excused from our program. The carrot then would be, if you can qualify for LEED Gold or Platinum, then you get a 25% building permit fee rebate up to $5,000. And that's directly out of the Eagle County regulations. And then we came up with a penalty, which is the stick for a point shortfall of 15 cents per point per times the total building area, which can add up to a significant amount of money. I don't have that, and I don't have an example for that. So from here, again, I think our biggest challenge is how to deal with the tenant finish. So we're gonna meet again as the Green Team Subcommittee and try and iron out those and a couple of other bumps that we've got, and move forward, maybe have some changes for the second reading. And then, as James mentioned in his cover there, we would like to move forward to the 2015 building codes and adopting those, mainly because this whole program was premised on the 2015 codes. So we'd like to have that for backup.
But the current ordinance does not do that. It would come along after.
So this ordinance is sort of like a transition sort of ordinance? It doesn't sound like there's answers, like it doesn't sound like we're approving something. It sounds like we're thinking about how it's going.
No, you would actually be approving code language that would institute this scoring system for non-residential and commercial buildings. But the Green Team Subcommittee is proposing and suggesting that after you approve this, that we look at adopting the 2015
And it might help to kind of, since we're having audio-visual trouble at the beginning, is just kind of emphasize that this came out of a Green Team project. They had a subcommittee that kind of did the grinding through of all of the details, and they held some public open houses where architects and builders could come in, and they ranked. So they did a couple things. One, I would say, sitting on the outside of this, they made some significant changes, based on some feedback that they got from representatives at that meeting. And two, they ranked
some of the buildings in town, some of the recent construction that we've had, you know, ranging from a totally green project from RMI to the new condos at Park Modern and Block 7, which is where the affordable housing units are coming in to test this. And I think my impression is there's just a couple things that the Green Team Subcommittee wanted to have some more discussion on between now and the second reading.
Okay, so it's Gary, Herschel, Rick, I believe.
So the question, when you do a point shortfall, where is that money? If you, like, you have a 75,000 square foot building, you've got over $11,000, what do you do with that money? What does that money just go into the general fund, or does it go towards adding solar, or what? I don't know.
We haven't thought that through.
Oh,
We haven't thought that through.
I can hear you, maybe not TV then.
I think, my preference would be to create a fund and use it also for the rebates in the event we ever get any rebates. Or the other option would be put it in the REMP fund, which is already set up
Okay.
for renewable energy, so.
Will you come with a recommendation on second reading?
Yeah, we'll come on a record, that's what I'm reading, that we'll have.
You need to put it
yeah,
somewhere.
Yeah.
And it should be noted that one of the items that the subcommittee has to kind of iron out is the ability of the town to collect REMP funds. There's been some discussion with CORE, and the town has been collecting REMP funds for some time, but there's seems to be an issue there that we have to kind of iron out with CORE for second reading.
Okay, Herschel?
In the code, do we have the same kind of regulations for residential? This is not for residential.
This is for multifamily residential.
And townhomes.
And
Townhomes we see.
Okay, how about non-townhomes?
single-family and duplex, we adopted some sustainable building regulations in 2009, but it's a different system. It's got a different point thresholds and different ways to obtain points that are more geared to single-family and duplex development. This system is.
So it's a similar thing, it's just made more for the residential, a single-family kind of thing.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good.
Okay, Rick? No, that Rick, then Rob.
Yeah, a
then
long
Bert.
time ago, I worked for Turner Construction on a number of high-rises. We had building standards for tenant finish work that, we applied. And so when negotiations started with a guy who wanted to do the 17,000 square foot on a floor, there was a specific requirement that he do X, Y, and Z, and those were a standard. And if he wanted to go more, he could pay more. But if it cost the building more energy use, then he paid more prorated on that energy use. And, it was well-received, and we had banks that, opened on the first and second floors, and they paid a lot more than the person who opened up a attorney's office on the fourth floor. So I don't know if that's what you're trying to get to, but we did other things too. You couldn't turn the whole building on at 7 o'clock in the morning, or you'd have a peak demand that would blow everybody out of the water. So we'd turn them on at 7, 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:15. So they're staggered. Their start times were staggered. I don't know if that is what you're leaning towards, but it did make a big impact on the cost of running those buildings.
And who coordinated that?
Well, it was Turner mostly, and then the
Okay.
ownership of the building during the negotiations, if they're gonna rent out a space, they would the architect would come in and the design team, and they would, we had a dentist office that had 7 operatories in it, they called them then, and, they were all individually plumbed and wired, and, it was pretty energy consumptive place.
Mhm.
So, you differentiate between just your standard office space and your, we had a diamond broker in there that had, bulletproof glass and stuff like that, but I don't think we'll see any of that. But I know what you're getting at, and that, if you start with, what do we see as a standard for the basic tenant finish? And if they're gonna create more issues, they, you know, they pay more.
Okay, thank you. That's good advice.
I think we're on the right path here, and I noticed we give points if the housing is located near, public transportation.
Yes.
It dawned on me that we should probably give points if it's located near the schools as well. Because you go by our schools during rush hour and the traffic's crazy, you don't wanna add to that problem.
Good one, okay.
There's some smart people sitting around this table.
See, Bernie's one of them.
Bernie's one, we're gonna see.
I think I'll pass now.
It's just a way to, you know, keep us having fun.
My first question, if I didn't get it, is what percentage of the total grab bag is given for energy efficiency compared to these other ancillary benefits? Prize, that's what I mean, the prize.
Can you answer that?
Yeah, it's a small percentage because most of it's covered by the International Energy Construction, IECC.
And that's kind of the baseline?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's some bonus points for renewable and added insulation levels and that sort of thing, but the majority of it is for the green or sustainable building technology.
So you're.
You're on, you know, 1 second, you're off mic.
I thought if I spoke loud enough, I could.
It's possible that she could hear you, I don't know.
Don't restart, stay. Should I repeat that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the point is that the IECC, the Energy Code, covers the energy part and insulation, and you get extra points for insulation and better windows and that sort of thing. But most of it is part of the green or sustainable part.
Okay, so I would then ask, I do have a little bit of dangerous knowledge because I'm head of the Facilities Committee of the library, and we're looking at recommissioning a LEED silver building that is not performed after 5 years up to our expectations. And the question is, do you have a metric by which, because LEED, I've found out looking into this, is not much of a guarantee of energy efficiency. There was a study that I asked Michael Kinsley to consult with me a little bit of Rocky Mountain Institute, and he put me in touch with this study done in the 80s, which looks at the relative efficiency of basic and silver LEED and gold and platinum LEED with the entire U.S. commercial office building infrastructure. And the basic and silver LEED, 30% of them were no better than the median level of the national average, which surprised me quite a bit. And so I become a little skeptical of some of these numbers, or lack of metric and lack of the amount of delta improvement you will get in decreased energy use by going from the basic code up to the additional cost of a silver or basic LEED. And that's my question. Are we really rewarding the right thing, or should we be looking at a different measure such as Energy Star points, which seems to be focused a lot more on energy efficiency, is from what I could tell?
Well, the big change that's happened over the years because of those studies is that building commissioning and energy monitoring are now part of the mandatory codes. So by commissioning a building, that's when we talk about moving to the 2015 code, that is mandatory. And that's included on the sheet as a mandatory thing. But it's that looking at it every year to see how it's doing, and there's a lot of ways to do that. So point well taken. And yes, that's part of the new way of looking at things.
Okay, anybody else? Is there a suggestion, a motion?
Staff would suggest this is a public hearing, so public comment opportunity.
Why didn't we do that first?
It's okay.
You're still on staff presentation.
You're still on questions. And
Okay,
so-
okay, this is public hearing. If there's anyone out there who would like to have a comment or ask a question, please do. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Sorry to almost skip that.
Town council approve ordinance 21, series of 20. on first reading and continue, and set the public hearing and second reading for November 10th. We have a meeting on November 10th, I'm gonna be out of town.
Who's mumbling over there?
The movement is mumbling.
Was there a second?
That was a motion.
Second. I guess that has some-
Further
that's
discussion?
Uh,
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for your work on this.
Thank you.
We apologize for the audio visual.
Hey, you know,
Sit
they're,
meetings all day, huh?
they go like that 50% of the time.
Yeah.
You'd think a PowerPoint presentation would work after like
need
30
anything
years.
We don't have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
1-to-1, Mike.